Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening for everybody all around the world that is following us in this Congress, this digital and technological Congress that deals with so many important issues. Uh, First of all, I would like to thank Uninove for hosting this Congress, and I would like to thank, on behalf of this university, Professor Augusto Rossini. I also would like to thank the organization and coordinators of this Congress, Professor Felipe Maziero and Professor Walter Calzaneto, that are working so hard to give us this opportunity, try to understand and to embrace all these issues and try to learn a little bit more about all these matters that are very, very important and they need to be understood for all the students. Also, I would like to thank the university and the students because now we have the legal week. So all the students that are following all this Congress, I would like to thank you for your presence and your audience. And all the people that are their homes in so many countries, so many continents that are following this Congress. So my name is Marcelo Rodante, and I'm here today to mediate and to talk a little bit about the online courts. Okay, and with us, we have two great professionals. The lawyer from the United States that nowadays is in California, Lamar Wagner. She's a great lawyer, a mediator, that she's working so hard on this specific field for so many years. Thank you, Lamar, for joining us at this Congress. And also, I would like to thank too, Professora Ana Maria Gonçalves. She's a mediator. She's a professional that is working so much for so many years in mediation field and other field, and she's an inspirational person to all of us. So, with all these introductions, I would like to initiate our Congress that is going to talk about online courts. So, first of all, I would like to quote an important frontispiece of the book of Richard Susskind that is quoted from Franz Kafka, and I would like to quote this for you because it's the sense, the main point that all of us are going to discuss today when we talk about online courts. And I quote that. Before the law stands a gatekeeper. A man from the country comes to the gatekeeper and requests admittance into the law. But the gatekeeper says that he cannot grant him admittance right now into the law. The man from the country had not expected such difficulties. After all, he thinks the law should be accessible to everyone of all times. So this is an important message that introduces our panel today, the access to justice. How online courts can help us to understand how we can improve the access to justice. How can we do that in a way that we live in a social digital society that needs to face all this improvement? And more than that, I would like to address and talk to you today about the difference between automation and transformation in the digital world. We as lawyers need to understand that we have improved in terms of using softwares, platforms. Now we have electronic process that are electronic. When I was just a student and when I was a young lawyer, because now I have more than 20 years of practice in law. At the beginning, when I went to the courts, I used, for instance, spreadsheets to try to understand the process and have to annotate everything that I have. All the process was manually handled, which consumed a lot of time. You know that the process, the case files could be lost, and we had a process to restore the files that were lost. But now, for more than 10 years, we have electronic process. This is automation. This is the improvement of the justice. But when we talk about online courts, we are talking about something different. We are talking about transformation. Transform the way that we behave on society. The way that we think about law. How can we, as Franz Kafka told us on that quote, how can we give to people more access to justice? What are the steps that we need to face and try to understand that we are living? We are people that are living this area of digital era. I came from the Generation X. I am a digital immigrant. But I know that I need to understand more and more how to use all these tools. And more than this, how to transform my mindset to try to be a better lawyer. And more of everything, we need to understand that we need to continue being humans. And humans needs to help humans to be better, to have a better world. So today, we are going to understand which is the difference between a court as a place and court as a service. And how can we together in all these countries try to understand better and better how these online courts are going to help us? Because I can predict that it's kind of a reality that we need to face, embrace, and understand. It's not an issue or a situation that we can try to avoid because we're not so accustomed to the technological stuff. No, we have to understand and use it in a better way. But more than this, we cannot forget that we are human beings and we need to keep relating with each other in a better world. So this is all about, okay? So with all this first introduction, I would like to hear what Ana Maria Gonçalves, a professional, she's a mediator, she's an international mediator, she's helping so many mediators to understand a better way to mediate. She is responsible for ICFML, is an international community of mediators all around the world that speak Portuguese, mainly speak Portuguese. So, Ana Gonçalves, thank you so much for participating in this Congress with us. And I really would like to hear from you. What are your impressions about online courts? How do you think the obstacles that we may face with this new situation? And of course, then we also can address the issue that nowadays we live in pandemic that accelerates all this process, of course. But more than this, when we solve this pandemic problem, how is going to be our normal? We are going to face all these questions in online courts. This is a reality. This is an improvement. This is a transformation. So, Ana, I really would like to hear from you, your thoughts about that, and thank you so much for participating with us.
Okay, thank you, Marcelo. Good morning, good afternoon, good night to everybody that is listening to us. And it's a pleasure for me to be here speaking about the topic that has been in my mind for the last 7 to 8 years, where I get the chance to study with several teachers around the world the topic of online dispute resolution. I just start with a quote also from Orna Rabinovich Aini, that is an associate professor of Faculty of Law at University of Iowa. And she predicts 70% of lawsuits will be handled online within a decade. And just to give us some idea, how did we arrive here? If we look at the 90s, we had what? In the courts, we had the introduction of ADR and we had the internet boom. And so the intersection of these two things make us the e-commerce. And so we have distant strangers with small scale connections. And they say that's no sense to meet face to face, either in court or in a private room. So we are going to use e-commerce to solve. We are going to use online to solve our disputes on e-commerce. And so we have this emergence of ODR as an equivalent to ADR, but online. And so we continue to see the internet development, and we from a place where we have, we were connected on our PCs, and now today we are all connected via our mobile phone. And so this related with social media, where you are not only connected with people that you don't know, you also connect with the people that is close to you. It comes that communication online became an habit for most part of people today. And what's happening? This communication online generates disputes. And so resolving disputes online start making more sense. And so online dispute resolution that started with disputes that were only online starts to be used also for disputes that are born offline. And why I'm saying this? Because this online dispute resolution that starts as an equivalent of alternative dispute resolution, but online, that starts global and that now is local, that starts from online disputes only, and now that resolves offline disputes also. We can also go on the type of customers. Online dispute resolution starts to business to consumer, and now we have more and more business to business disputes that are also solved online. As we discussed, we have these small claims that were the starting of the use of technology to solve disputes, and more we see claims that have big values being solved completely online too. And so this starts on the private sector. What are we seeing now? We are seeing that now we can to court. And to courts, and we have more and more courts that are using technology to solve the disputes to use technology in different stage of how to solve that dispute. And just to continue giving this overview, this impact of technology during all these years had an impact also on user expectations. And so I like very much when Daniel Rayner, that is a professional of ODR, says that if you can buy a house online, if you can consult with your doctor online, if you can talk to your family all over the world via the web, if you can find someone to get married online, of course you want to solve your disputes online too. And so this resolving disputes online become not only an expectation for the users, but also something that if a conflict resolver professional that wants to be up to date needs to study in order to provide those kind of service. And now COVID just proved that in a more broad way. So these professionals of conflict resolutions, we have more and more channels to communicate with our customers. We need to know how to manage information in a lot of more different ways. It's not only to go to the photocopy and have the files in front of us, and also all the group dynamics using technology of information and communication changed. And this requires for conflict resolvers much more skills. Why am I coming here? Because technology, and I come to your question, Marcelo, technology is changing the ways we communicate. It's changing the ways we solve disputes. It's changing our expectations. Today, most of us, when we have a problem, we expect a 24/7 service to be ready to answer our problem in an efficient way and a transparent way and have the problem solved quickly. So courts enter this technology, how can I say, in the second decade of the 21st century. And so start covering with technology, not only the e-commerce, also the small claims, but also neighbor traffic, taxes, body injuries, family, even family disputes that at the starting when we discussed that without experience, just say, oh no, family will be the last kind of disputes that want to go online. Parties would always want to express their feelings face to face. It's something that changed completely. And what we are studying now is that more and more families, and I think that Lamar will speak to us about that, more and more families are very happy not to, when they are in conflict, not to be on the same room with the other person. But this to say, the impact of technology on the court, so covering all types of disputes, but also offering creativity in the types of the process that were offered via online dispute resolution. So not only as the starting, we took what we have done with ADR and put it online, but now creativity on how to automated negotiation works, online facilitation, mediation, arbitration, adjudication, all these triage systems, they not only mimic the face-to-face, but they take advantage of the technology. And if I quote again Orla, she said, we are not seeing technology as a limitation that require us to do things differently. But actually, technology accelerates the new opportunities that open up with this shift. And so this is where we are today with the new courts or virtual courts, and all the creativity that we can bring to design the new access to justice for the next century, I believe. Marcelo?
Now, can you hear me?
Yes, okay, now I can hear you.
Thank you so much, Anna. And now, Lou Wagner, please, what are your thoughts about what Anna was talking to us? What's your idea about online courts? Please, would you like to bring some light over this subject, this matter? I would like to hear from you, Lou. Thank you so much for participating with us. It's an honor to be with you.
Thank you, Marcelo. Thanks, everybody. I'm Lamar Wagner. I'm an attorney, mediator, collaborative lawyer, and I am licensed in Texas and in California. I've been doing online mediation for many years, I think, since it became possible technologically to do online mediation, because some of my mediations involved people who were not together geographically, like sometimes they were not even in the same country. I think because of my connections with different countries and the fact that I speak multiple languages, sometimes people would get into custody disputes, for example, with a partner who is no longer in the United States. And bringing that partner here to start an expensive court process, it was not feasible. And so online mediation became an option for people who were geographically away from each other and were willing to resolve their disputes amicably. And so that was my history of online mediation. I have some slides here. Let me share my screen with you. Here it is. So now we come with virtual courts. So let's, I'll try to, so let's look at the road ahead of what I'm going to talk about. I'm first going to talk about patterns in innovation, because how innovation happens, how does it spread, then courts as a service instead of courts as necessarily just a place, and binding judicial decisions as a function for courts. Of course, we can have binding decisions through arbitration as well, but they're different. So they're competitors, right, to that kind of a service. And access to justice as the goal, and virtual courts as one of the means to achieve that goal. And so I'm glad that, Marcelo, you mentioned access to justice repeatedly during your introduction. And I use the term virtual courts. I heard Marcelo using the term online courts. In California, we actually call them remote courts. So I just want to start a little bit with the history of innovation, because I notice people tend to have dualistic thinking. They think things are either or. We either have courts online, or we have courts the traditional way. But actually, the history of innovation is not either or, it's both and. And I'm going to start with a quote as well. Well, actually, first I'm going to add that innovation adds, and we do have a subtraction function in the world. It's called obsolescence. So innovation adds, obsolescence subtracts, and what changes is the popularity of different solutions. And so the quote is that the diffusion of innovation is really just an adoption of a behavior to satisfy a need. And we see that, let's use an example. So things don't just disappear. Sometimes they do when they become completely obsolete, but most of the time, things don't disappear. They just become less common as better solutions, more convenient solutions become more popular. And so let's look at the job. I always like to focus, what is the job to be done? And let's use this example here. The job to be done is transportation. And I don't even want to talk about technology so much. I like the term behavior, because the technology makes behavior possible, but it's actually the choice of that different behavior that drives the popularity of a certain technological solution. And so here, I didn't have numbers for ODRs because this chart, I think we can look at some ODR here too. But these are numbers for using different means of transportation over time. And so we see the horse doesn't disappear, it just doesn't become very common anymore. And then we have, of course, the trains becoming less common. We have airplanes appearing. And of course, once airplanes, when they started, they really focused on service because they had to compete with other means of transportation. And the service was awesome. If anybody remembers what it was to fly in the 70s, the service was very good. And now I think most people would agree that the service kind of sucks. Am I allowed to say that? I don't even know, but the service is not as good as it used to be. And most people don't really enjoy flying as much as they did 3 decades ago. And the same with car ownership. In the US, these numbers are for the United States. And so car ownership in the United States is falling, not a lot, but falling slowly, because Uber and other ride-sharing services are growing so fast. And so we can see the same a little bit with ODR. We can see, for example, the line that has the horse. I would put jury trial there because ODR appeared as a competitor, and also trial by judge appeared as an option to jury trial. And so jury trial now, I'll give you the numbers for Texas. In Texas, only 2% of cases actually go to a trial. And of those, only a very small fraction go to a jury trial. There's even a sentence in Texas called the disappearing jury trial. So jury trials are rare these days. And we can compare with ODR too. We can see, for example, as mediation appeared, it becomes more popular. Arbitration becomes more popular. And then judge trials become maybe there with the line with the trains, and jury trials, the line with the horse. So the solutions don't disappear. They become part of a bundle of options. And options to do what? To do a job, right? And I would argue, I'll go back really quick, that here the job to be done, if you ask most people would say, the job to be done is justice. The job to be done is justice. And courts as a service in the fulfillment of that job. And so the traditional view is that courts are a place where you access a service. And the reality now, especially for California, but the reality in many places during COVID really established a new normal. Courts as a service that must be accessed virtually. In California, it's truly a must. And then the reality after COVID courts as a service that can be accessed in different ways, including virtually. And I'll start with the situation we had in California, and we still have, because we're still not out of the, who knows how long the COVID situation is going to last. But in March, the Supreme Court of California announced that they were amending their oral argument procedures in response to COVID-19. And they amended it to allow for only, because they went exclusively online. And so they amended it to allow for online hearings. And so that's March 2020. Here we see the Supreme Court of California already adjusted to what's going to be the new normal. And that was the only way to have hearings at the Supreme Court of California. So this is April. Those are oral arguments at the Supreme Court of California. And one comment that was very common was like, well, but people will never adapt. This is not going to work. People never adapt. And this is from the newspaper. It's saying, as California's High Court resumes arguments in altered format, parties adapt. We are human beings. We are adaptable by nature. And so people started to adapt. And since March 2020, since COVID started in California, the Supreme Court of California has not delayed any scheduled arguments. And so everything proceeded online. And all oral arguments were broadcast live. They were archived online, and that included the video conferences. And so here's another example. Here's the Sacramento Superior Court. So in California, we have the Superior Court is what I think in other jurisdictions, like in Brazil, it would be called Primeira Instância, is the first court that you access. And then we have the Appeals Court, which is a middle court, and then we have the California Supreme Court, which is the highest court in the state. And that's not to be confused with the federal system in the United States, where we have the US Supreme Court. So the Sacramento Superior Court had remote hearings, and this is from we can't record these, and so this is from from a TV news station about remote hearings. And going back to the term, what is the job? What is the job that is to be done? And so even when the news station chose to report on this, they're not saying courts are open. Remember, that's not how people think. They're thinking open for justice. So the job to be done is justice. And this is a way to achieve that job. And so here we see the judge from the Sacramento Superior Court. On the top right, so the judge is on the top left. On the top right, we see, this is a criminal case. It's a criminal hearing. So we see the defendant behind bars. This was broadcast on TV, so his image is blurred. But we see his attorney, so that's the defense attorney, and his paralegal sitting behind him. And then on the bottom, we see the prosecutor accessing from home. So the prosecutor is accessing through video conference. And this is the same hearing. It's being broadcast online on YouTube. And that's how the courts have been operating in California since March. We've been 100% remote. Here it's called remote. Marcelo uses the term online. I use the term virtual for this one, but they all mean the same thing. We've all been operating in this new normal. And so I consider, and I propose, that binding judicial decisions is the function of the primary. They do other things as well. But when people think of going to court, most of the time they're seeking a binding judicial decision that is appealable, right? So then we can differentiate it with arbitration a little bit, which is a competitor. See, the courts need to sometimes consider themselves as having competitors now through ODR. So the function remains unchanged, regardless of virtual or traditional format. And if we keep our focus on that, what is the function? What is the service? What is this for? So access to justice, I propose, it's the goal. And I would define access to justice as the ability of people to seek and obtain a remedy for their grievances through formal or informal institutions of justice in compliance with human rights standards. So notice I added formal or informal institutions of justice. And access to justice includes, but is not limited to, improving an individual's access to the courts. And so I propose that virtual courts are one of, because remember in technology, we add, innovation adds, obsolescence subtracts, and things just become more popular or less popular. I agree with Anna. I think virtual courts are here to stay. I think a lot of people who went through this process during COVID are going to consider this to be better in several aspects. And I think there's a whole generational shift that's happening because of COVID. We have a whole generation of students that consider virtual interactions the absolute normal, because since March, at least in California, they've been attending classes 100% online. So this kind of interaction through video conference is the normal, it's the new normal interaction, the more common interaction. And the person-to-person interaction, because of this adaptation we're having to do, is becoming the rare, the out of the ordinary interaction. And so I'll conclude with this quote. Is by a judge from Texas, from Williamson County in Texas. And the quote is, "I want to stress that the courts have been open and everybody has access to the courts. It just looks a little bit different." So that's, if I can finish just with that, it just looks a little bit different. And I would then save the rest of my time for questions. But I think I agree with Anna and with her quote that 70%, there is this forecast that 70% will be online in the future. I don't know if the percentage will be 70, but I think once we return to, I don't think we're ever going to go to business as usual, but I think once we return to having the option of the traditional court services, the in-person, I think a lot of people may choose to still remain with the virtual court if it is offered. I believe it will be offered because it has certain advantages, especially in terms of access to justice. It's another means to access the services of the court.
Yeah, and I was listening to you, and I was Lamara, and it was excellent, all the points you bring, because it makes me think, okay, what are these questions related to access to justice? Now it's a reality, as you said, since COVID, everybody is online. But I was saying, okay, but how these questions that in January, I was in a conference and we were saying, how can use technology to better answer parties to resolve their disputes? What we see now, it's that they translate everything from face-to-face to online in one day. And so I think that a lot of adaptations need to be done too. This has been very quick. And this has been just, this is what we do online, face-to-face, let's do it, put it a camera and let's do it. I think that's the start. Because using technology is much more than just doing what we do face-to-face online. And so that is the purpose of, yes, we are doing online, everything. Yes, we are doing it since, COVID, because we need it. And because if we do the balance, access to justice or no justice or justice online, of course, we go for choosing to give options to go online. But what we do today is what is the best way to use technology. Are we having the gatekeepers the best we can? Are we looking at security the way we need? All this, I think that we are at the starting point here. And that was make me think that what will be this new digital scenario for dispute resolution. And I believe that we will create some systems that will be even more fair and efficient in access to justice using technology than what we had without using technology, and that we are at the starting of that. That really what you said make me think about all that. And also because I would say two important points in my point of view is that artificial intelligence, of course, amplifies the opportunities of access to justice, but also the risk. And so I keep thinking and studying the ethical standards of all these, not the platforms you use, and the standards that are used when we do what we do online today in a court. They need to be designed and monitored, and in order to be ethically correct. That I would say I would stress really that point as an important point for the future of what we are already seeing today, because this is a new way to access to justice for sure. We are not trusting anymore in a third human party. We are also trust in a fourth party, that is the technology. And if we go with some platforms with algorithms inside, so trust is more broadly brought to conflict the resolution. And also we have this, and I know you come from technology too. We are changing from this small data that, we use to big data. And we know in technology that big data needs big improvement of the way we manage that data. So these implications, of course, if we measure in terms of efficiency, okay, today we have less time. We have a reduced caseload, as you said, no caseload since COVID. Accessibility, yes, 24/7 technology allows that. And some studies start saying that users are even more satisfied with their answer they get, or they manage to have to their conflict. So, as in many areas where we see new technologies entering, we see that there is an enhancement efficiency, and I think we are seeing that in courts today too. The trade-off between efficiency and justice, I think that brings a change in mindset. So in mindset about what is the implication of this technology in courts, because more justice does not mean that you have a more long and complicated process. In the old days, you say, "Oh, my process takes a long time in the court." You are having justice. You are hearing more people. You are getting more attention for the courts to do that. And what we can see today is that the impact of online dispute resolution and on this system can a process that is simple can give new opportunities to increase more access to justice and be more efficiency. And last, that I think that can be important, that can reduce a lot of human bias that we have on what we can call face-to-face justice. But I know I was just, Marcelo, I just pop up after what Lamar makes me think.
That's interesting, Anna, because I just want to highlight that the way technology evolves, right? These are first generation online courts. So yes. First generation, and remember, they were enabled by several innovations that came before. So the reason California was able to adapt so quickly was because California already had e-filing. So all the interactions, the initial interactions with the court, submission of, briefs, all of that, it was done already through e-filing. And so, and as people, if you look at humanity as people, we learned a lot in the past 20 years. Pretty much everybody knows how to use email. And there are billions, like I think pretty much everybody now has a cell phone with a camera. So remember how difficult this would be if it required everybody to have a computer, because not everybody has a computer, but pretty much everybody these days have a smartphone with a camera and can access some Wi-Fi connection. So there was a lot of, I call it plumbing, right? There was a lot of plumbing that went on. There was a lot of infrastructure, and there was a lot of learning that happened that we didn't notice because we were learning through other things. But it enabled finally this additional step, which is more visible, but it was the one more step in a long series of collective learning experiences for everybody, for the attorneys as well. And one thing that California did, it updated the code of ethics for lawyers to require, so there's always a duty of competence for lawyers, but it updated the duty of competence to expressly require that lawyers be technologically educated and capable in the relevant technologies of the process of the system. So it's kind of vague because it's going to include what's relevant for that time in our interaction, right? So for example, emails, I don't think California would probably consider a violation of the duty of competence from the part of a lawyer to not know how to use email. And I think now video conference is also part of that. And because it is a duty, then there is a corresponding obligation on the part of the lawyer to get trained and become proficient. And so I think what we are saying now is the first generation. And so first generation, I believe, has these components, the e-filing as the interest, like the beginning of the process. And now the option, of course, during COVID is the only option, but hopefully this will get resolved sometime, and then it will become an additional option to the traditional method of providing court services.
Lamar, Iana, there is a second point that I would like to address with you, is that in main countries and main systems, legal systems, for instance, I'm going to talk a little bit about Brazil. Of course, that we have the judiciary system is organized in terms of territory. So, of course, that the way that we organize our juridical system, of course, we have all the judges, they have jurisdiction, because all judges, they can say about the law. Okay, so that's the concept of jurisdiction, to be able to say about the law. However, these jurisdictions is limited by a rule of competence. And this rule of competence can be territorial or functional. So we have different levels of jurisdictions. However, all judges, judges, they can say about the law, but in a specific phase normally. So if you are in São Paulo, we have around the city and the states, and we have all the states in Brazil. All states has a specific court, and we have the Supreme Court and Superior Court, of course. And this organization, they was formed and created in terms of territorial, because we need to have sums, and we have problems around the location. However, and this is the issue that I would like to address to both of you, and I would like to hear a little bit from you, is that don't you imagine that in a short time we are going to face specifically this issue? Because why do you need to have this kind of organization? You know that if I live in Moema, or I live in Santa Amaro, they are neighbors in São Paulo, for instance. And so Why do I have to be restrained for this area if we have a whole new system that can deliver a different kind of jurisdiction, not more in terms of territory, but it's an open space. And this, in my point of view, would be amazing, because this would be, in fact, a way to deliver more access to justice. Because, of course, that if you try to understand how all these territorial courts handle this issue, there are a huge difference in terms of numbers and difference in terms of the quality of the judges. But now we can change the system and change this system, the sum systems, and how we can deliver this organization. We need to change as well the way that the procedure itself is handled. And we are going to face the necessity to understand the scales of the conflict, because we have mass conflicts. We have some conflicts that don't need to have hearings and don't have to spend too much time. So how do you see this important changing in the structure of the organization of the justice? How can you imagine that can happen? And this is going to be vital to change the way that the procedure itself delivers this justice. And of course, when Lamar talks about the first generation and the second generation, the second generations, if I'm not wrong, is related to the artificial intelligence. So how can we predict the results of the conflicts in some cases? And if this is a way to have a confrontation with the power of the judge, because if we have intelligence predicting the results of the conflicts, why do you want to need a specific judge to deliver justice if we can understand and predict the result of that? I would like to hear from both of you your thoughts about this issue, about the organization of the judiciary power, and how the second generation are going to predict, and how we are going to face and understand and embrace this idea. Please, Lu or Ana, which one?
Do you want to make it? Okay, for me.
As you want. Yeah, for me.
Yes, Marcelo, there is a cultural question, but I think it's because my perspective is influenced by where I live. And so in the United States in general, one of the reasons for local jurisdiction of courts, it's because sometimes, actually very often, especially family court, you to deliver justice, to have a fair result, the justice apply what's called local standards. Local standards is, in this community, there are certain things that we do certain ways, and they may appear unreasonable, or they may appear unfair, they may appear different from a judge from another jurisdiction. And so in the US system, it'll be a little bit more difficult, especially because those state judges are elected. So they're not appointed, they are elected. And so I think people will probably want to have the ability to go in front of the judge that they voted, that the community said, here is one of the representatives of justice for our community. So I think the part of jurisdiction, because of cultural, and I think that's actually a plus because it recognizes cultural differences. We created states, we created nation states, we're now a planetary society. We consider some problems at the planetary level that had never happened for humanity before. We're learning a lot as a collective, right? But like global warming, we talk about global warming on a planetary scale. That is a new kind of talk for humanity. We talked before planetary scale for other things, like I want to go back, because I want to give credit to our ancestors, right? There were there are only two crimes of universal jurisdiction. One of them was slavery, and the second one to consider universal jurisdiction was piracy. So humanity considered things in a planetary scale before, but not at this level. so Marcelo, that local component, the cultural component, I think it's important, at least for the collective where I see myself immersed in and practicing as an attorney. It was the whole reason in the US we created federal courts, because there was a perception that when people from two states had to bring up, litigate in a state court, that the out-of-state person would suffer some sort of prejudice. So in some disputes, we have even the federal court system for disputes between that involve different states.
Maybe there is a difference, important difference that we need to keep in mind, that because the United States, of course, you have a common law system, and also you have a strong autonomy of states.
Yes.
And you have local and norms that are very local. In Brazil, for instance, we tried to copy in the past the United States model, federation model, and we had a federation, and we divided into states. There was the process was inverse, but the point is that we have the civil law is federal, the procedural law is federal, the penal law is federal. All the laws are federal, and the states there are not so. There's not so much regulations. Yes, of course, we're having tax issues, but normally, in general, we are facing a federal issue. So maybe for us, it would be a little bit different, this necessity to understand
That's
the locality.
Because even for attorneys, right?
So, Anna, what are your thoughts about that?
Oh, it's interesting because now when we talk technology, we just forget that we are human beings, that we start by discussing face-to-face, and that's discussing face-to-face that is our normal. What we do now, being 100% online, is not the way how humans interact normally. As for being here online, we think that we are, doing this very naturally. We are spending much more energy. Our brain is spending much more energy to be here online, to try to express ourselves in a way that the others translate, to try to look this camera here that not in front of us. All this requires a lot of energy for us. If we do only this, we will be all depressed in very short term. So I'm not addressing your point from the point you expect. So my question is, we continue to be human beings, and I believe that technology will always still a tool to help us live better, to help us have a better life, to build a better society, more fair, with all that. So even if tomorrow you can do everything online, is that what we want? I personally, no. For me, the answer is no. I want to have the tools online that allow me, for example, to have. Today we are in 3 different locations, and for example, a court that has 3 different locations with parties around the world, and that need to solve that issue, and that is much more efficient, much more practical, and it makes much more sense for that dispute to be solved like that. But what I really believe is in choice. I like to give choice for the human being to have access to justice. So does he want a judge? Okay, he goes to the judge. Does he want online? Okay, go to online. Does he want to go to mediation? He goes to mediation. Does he want to go to arbitration? Go to arbitration. But for me, the choice is the key for all that. And I would not love at all, Marcelo, to just because one of the new points of the virtual courts, or whatever we call them, is just to eliminate jurisdictions. We just say, your day in the court is finished. No more. Now it's your day in the screen. Never. I don't think that will be the future. So this is my answer, top of mind from what you just said. Of course, from a political point of view, from a country point of view, you could reduce a lot of cost. Okay, but at what cost? That will be my thing. And the other thing that I'm hearing when I hear you say all that is is about what are we discussing when we discuss access to justice. And for me, choice, it's part of that discussion. So that's how I answer your top of mind, knowing that I had prepared an idea, and some ideas about, okay, what is this new digital landscape in courts and what does it bring to us? And of course, I have the point. I have here on my notes a little bit below the camera, because it's like that we use. And it says territorial selection of the court, problems eliminated. It's exactly what you can. But where is the culture that Lamar took? And I don't think it's because common law, civil law, Brazil, United States. I don't think. I think it's because we are human. And as humans, we want to interact face to face, and we want to use technology as what it brings us more. And just to complete, because that's another, you have some studies, as I mentioned, that says, okay, in some areas, it's better to be judged by a system rather than by a judge. There is less bias. Less bias because you are a woman, or because you are Black, or because whatever. And okay, in that case, if I'm part of a minority and I know that study, probably I would say I prefer the platform. I prefer the automatic platform that goes to AI, that I even don't know who is the AI that put the data inside. But anywhere, I prefer the platform rather than going to these courts that, I feel or whatever that are going to be less fair.
Yeah.
I have another question that I would like to address. Lamar, and then of course I would like to hear from you too. In your best dreams, in your major traditional ideas, in terms of trying to predict our future in maybe 2 years ahead, what are your dreams in the digital area in relation to the digital courts or online courts? What are our best dreams about that?
I think I agree with Anna. I think with more options, we have more degrees of freedom and more ways to exercise that freedom of choice. But I think it's going to evolve like many other technologies, because as a tribe, see, we're still kind of like, we act as a collective in a certain ways. We're kind of like a tribe, right? Still trying to solve the problems of existence. And so I think it will go the same way as other technologies. First, we start with this. There was a need and we had to adapt. And then the next step is we had to adapt with tools that were not ideal. Zoom is not ideal for court services, probably. So then the second step is that once the market exists, if there is a need, if there's a niche, there will be a way to scratch that, right? So once the market exists, there will be better tools. And we saw that with everything, right? We even saw that with social media. First, we even had like the little listservs, right? As soon as we had email, we had listservs, and then eventually it started to evolve and it became, MySpace and then Facebook. And now we have even the ones that are going to replace Facebook in the future. And so I think it's going to be first, make the transition so that there is a need. And next, specialized tools. Second, predictive analytics will become better, much better, because if I know the algorithm, like what Anna was saying, if I prefer to be judged by an algorithm, but even more so, if I know what the algorithm is, then I can guide my own decision. I can even say, hey, I know that what's considered fair and just in this jurisdiction, right, is XYZ, and I did not do XYZ, so I did not act correctly. I might as well go ahead and not challenge this fine, or I might as well go ahead and settle this person, right? So I think predictive analytics will develop before we even start seeing significant, but it's a component of AI, right? But what people mention AI, sometimes they want to look more at the machine learning and automating everything. I think that part Marcelo, you started this talk by talking about technology as automation and technology as transformation. So I think it's going to go, automation has already happened, like e-filing, all of that. So we're going through stages of automation of court systems. Next, we went to the stage that I call connection, which is the stage we're seeing now with virtual courts, with using online conferencing to resolve disputes in the court. So that's the connection stage. That's where we get interfaces and ways to have meetings and interactions mediated through technology. So ODR went through the same process of evolution. And then next, which is I think will be maybe the fourth generation of online courts, maybe the fifth, is the transformation stage, where we start actually using technology to do things that were clearly impossible for the courts to do before.
I didn't hear your dream, your best dream.
My dream, I love technology, and I can understand logic and algorithms really well. So I actually, I'm going to sound horrible. I'm not biased, against the human race, definitely not. But in certain situations, especially because I am a woman of color, right? I am a woman who speaks the language with an accent. So there are situations where I actually trust an AI agent, like a much better, operating through an algorithm without certain cultural biases. See, we started with culture, we end with culture again. So there are ways where I trust an algorithm to resolve some problems of human cultural bias. So my dream would be having that option, as an option, because remember, degrees of freedom, right? Choice. So as an option, as an add-on, not as something that takes away other options. So as an opt-in, something that I choose and something that I select out of my own free will.
Okay, good. And Anna, please tell us, what are your best dreams in relation to this matter? Confess to us, Anna.
Oh, okay. The question is in related with the use of technology related to resolve disputes. Am I asking? Is your question about that? How
yes,
technology
trying to predict the best possible future. Try to predict the best possible future to us. In your
For me, the best possible future is a partnership. It's never, it's exactly what Lamar said. It's not one thing or another, with technology or without technology. So why am I saying that? Because, we speak about artificial intelligence, we speak on these ICTs, this technology, we speak about cloud computing, but we have what we call also, and that I'm passionate about, and that's why I think it's going to help us, it's what we call effective computing. And effective computing, in my opinion, will help humans being more sensitive to something that they are not today. What means, just give you an idea. I'm sure you are an excellent mediator, Marcelo, and you too, Lamara. And you do the best you can when you are with two parties to try to understand what are the emotions that are driving what they are saying. So now just try to think, and it will be not far from today, try to think that in front of you, you have a computer that is helping you. And the computer will say, you are just hearing the part A saying something, and the computer will say, part B is not liking at all what he's hearing. Or he's saying, part B is being stressed by what he's saying. Or you have this computer that is saying, look, this guy says the word whatever 30 times in the last half an hour. Does it mean something for you? Or something like, after 3 hours of a mediation, the machine tells you, Anna, you are in a bad shape. If you continue like that, you will be there for several days and you will never have an agreement. And so these kind of, in Brazil, you call it like co-mediator. I like to call it a helper, but that takes in care the effective that's why it's calling affective computer. Details in care, our affections, our emotions. That's what I believe is the most important in any resolution, conflict resolution system. So this partnership, that's my dream.
So, unfortunately, we end up our time here. So I would like to thank you so much, Lamar. Thank you so much, Ana, for your time, your presence. I also would like to thank the audience, all the participants, all the students of Uninove. I would like to thank the opportunity to be here and try to deliver this important message. The job to be done, as Lamar said, to bring justice to people and try to deliver it in a way that humanizes us as a collective, as a group. And of course, that we are facing all this transformation. We are part of that. And I would like to emphasize the importance of all students keep working hard, trying to learning about that and be the best that they can to that we can have a really better world. Thank you, Ana. Thank you, Franco, Walter, Augusto Rossini.
Thank you for the
all of
invitation.
you. We keep in touch and see you next day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
And keep following the Congress. We have a lot of panels, and we, of course, want your audience all the time. Thank you so much. See you next time. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, girls. Thank you so much.
Uninove is one of the top private universities in Latin America and the best private university in Brazil. Uninove's facts really impress. There are 10 campuses in the state of São Paulo and more than 100 distance education centers across Brazil, all equipped with the most innovative technology and infrastructure, built and founded on more than 60 years of history. Originated in 1956 from a typing school and now became a reference for higher education in Brazil. We were awarded with the highest higher education, ranking Times Higher Education, as the best Brazilian private university in social impact. But for us at Uninove, the great prize for social impact is being able to insert over 200,000 students in the job market. It is also to develop partnerships with the most important companies in Brazil. It is also to foster education by offering full scholarships from early childhood education and to facilitate the entry of higher school students who cannot afford and wish to start a university degree. We also offer totally free English and computer science workshops. It is also to grant scholarships for the training of researchers and to be able to offer back to society all this knowledge. Our clinics also serve over 1 million people for free in health and family programs. We promote dental care, medical, psychological, and develop social programs that give full scholarships involving students in important social causes. It is also training and transforming people through education. Uninove, tradition and innovation in transformation through education.
Compartilhamos da certeza de que métodos adequados de resolução de disputas criam ambientes de negócio muito mais dinâmicos. Acreditamos em pontos de vista que, equilibrados, geram soluções mais justas e eficazes. Estamos entre as líderes no Brasil. Há 25 anos, trabalhamos para oferecer serviços ágeis e eficientes com custos de transação competitivos. Câmara de Conciliação, Mediação e Arbitragem Ciesp-Fiesp. Equilíbrio e celeridade.
Fala pessoal, tudo bem?
Se você está vindo aqui pela primeira vez, meu nome é Franco Mazieiro.
Oi Franco, obrigado pela pergunta. Olha, o especialista em direito aqui é você, não eu.
E esse é o canal Mais Direito. Não perca todo dia aqui no canal. Às 13 horas, programa Sexta com Direito. A gente vai conversar, a gente vai dar sequência para mais um O que é? Arras ataque, divórcio, desconsideração da personalidade jurídica, Lei Geral de Proteção de Dados, da inteligência artificial, startup, blockchain, guarda, recuperação judicial, técnicas de negociação. Você está acompanhando aí essas sugestões de temas de TCC, de monografia. Ontem nós conversamos sobre direito de família, direito e tecnologia. E hoje nós vamos conversar sobre direito penal, direito tributário, direito trabalhista, direito empresarial, direito constitucional. Eu queria uma aula com o nosso professor João Bosco do que é direito de concorrência, teoria do jogo e a arbitragem, direito societário, direito previdenciário, as cotas, a indivisibilidade das cotas, hacker, reorganização, arbitration, que é a teoria da imprevisão. Qual que é a diferença entre taxa e imposto, entre DPO e encarregado, entre conciliação e mediação? Vamos dar sequência aqui à correção de mais uma questão. Esse projeto que eu estou me referindo é o projeto Carreiras Jurídicas, que é a de delegado da Polícia Civil. Cartório de protestos do Procurador de Estado, profissão de perito. Muito obrigado a todos vocês aí de casa, sejam bem-vindos ao canal Mais Direito. Já fica o convite para se inscrever no canal para você poder acompanhar todos os próximos vídeos. Um abraço e até o próximo vídeo.
Uninove is one of the top private universities in Latin America and the best private university in Brazil. Uninove's facts really impress. There are 10 campuses in the state of São Paulo and more than 100 distance education centers across Brazil, all equipped with the most innovative technology and infrastructure, built and founded on more than 60 years of history. Originated in 1956 from a typing school and now became a reference for higher education in Brazil. We were awarded with the highest higher education ranking Times Higher Education, as the best Brazilian private university in social impact. But for us at Uninove, the great prize for social impact is being able to insert over 200,000 students in the job market. It is also to develop partnerships with the most important companies in Brazil. It is also to foster education by offering full scholarships from early childhood education and to facilitate the entry of higher school students who cannot afford and wish to start a university degree. We also offer totally free English and computer science workshops. It is also to grant scholarships for the training of researchers and to be able to offer back to society all this knowledge. Our clinics also serve over 1 million people for free in health and family programs. We promote dental care, medical, psychological, and develop social programs that give full scholarships involving students in important social causes. It is also training and transforming people through education. Uninove, tradition and innovation in transformation through education.
Compartilhamos da certeza de que métodos adequados de resolução de disputas criam ambientes de negócio muito mais dinâmicos. Acreditamos em pontos de vista que, equilibrados, geram soluções mais justas e eficazes. Estamos entre as líderes no Brasil. Há 25 anos, trabalhamos para oferecer serviços ágeis e eficientes com custos de transação competitivos. Câmara de Conciliação, Mediação e Arbitragem Ciesp-Fiesp. Equilíbrio e celeridade.
Fala pessoal, tudo bem?
Se você está vendo aqui pela primeira vez, meu nome é Franco Mazieiro.
Oi, Franco, obrigado pela pergunta. Olha, o especialista em direito aqui é você, não eu.
E esse é o canal Mais Direito. Não perca todo dia aqui no canal. Às 13 horas, programa Sexta com Direito. A gente vai conversar, a gente vai dar sequência para mais um O que é Arras, TAC, divórcio, desconsideração da personalidade jurídica, Lei Geral de Proteção de Dados, da inteligência artificial, startup, blockchain, guarda, recuperação judicial, técnicas de negociação. Você está acompanhando aí essa sequência de sugestões de temas de TCC, de monografia. Ontem nós conversamos sobre direito de família, direito e tecnologia. E hoje nós vamos conversar sobre direito penal, direito tributário, direito trabalhista, direito empresarial, direito constitucional. Eu queria uma aula com o nosso professor João Bosco do que é direito de concorrência, teoria do jogo e a arbitragem, direito societário, direito previdenciário, as cotas, a indivisibilidade das cotas, hacker, reorganização, arbitration, que é a teoria da imprevisão. Qual que é a diferença entre taxa e imposto, entre DPO e encarregado, entre conciliação e mediação. Vamos dar sequência aqui à correção de mais uma questão. Esse projeto que eu estou me referindo é o projeto Carreiras Jurídicas, que é a de delegado da Polícia Civil. Cartório de protestos do Procurador de Estado, profissão de perito. Muito obrigado a todos vocês aí de casa, sejam bem-vindos ao canal Mais Direito. Já fica o convite para se inscrever no canal para você poder acompanhar todos os próximos vídeos. Um abraço e até o próximo vídeo.
Uninove is one of the top private universities in Latin America and the best private university in Brazil. Uninove's facts really impress. There are 10 campuses in the state of São Paulo and more than 100 distance education centers across Brazil, all equipped with the most innovative technology and infrastructure, built and founded on more than 60 years of history. Originated in 1956 from a typing school and now became a reference for higher education in Brazil. We were awarded with the highest higher education, ranking Times Higher Education, as the best Brazilian private university in social impact. But for us at Uninove, the great prize for social impact is being able to insert over 200,000 students in the job market. It is also to develop partnerships with the most important companies in Brazil. It is also to foster education by offering full scholarships from early childhood education and to facilitate the entry of higher school students who cannot afford and wish to start a university degree. We also offer totally free English and computer science workshops. It is also to grant scholarships for the training of researchers and to be able to offer back to society all this knowledge. Our clinics also serve over 1 million people for free in health and family programs. We promote dental care, medical, psychological, and develop social programs that give full scholarships involving students in important social causes. It is also training and transforming people through education. Uninove, tradition and innovation in transformation through education.
Compartilhamos da certeza de que métodos adequados de resolução de disputas criam ambientes de negócio muito mais dinâmicos. Acreditamos em pontos de vista que, equilibrados, geram soluções mais justas e eficazes. Estamos entre as líderes no Brasil. Há 25 anos, trabalhamos para oferecer serviços ágeis e eficientes com custos de transação competitivos. Câmara de Conciliação, Mediação e Arbitragem Ciesp-Fiesp. Equilíbrio e celeridade.
Fala pessoal, tudo bem?
Se você está vendo aqui pela primeira vez, meu nome é Franco Mazieiro.
Oi, Franco, obrigado pela pergunta. Olha, o especialista em direito aqui é você, não eu.
E esse é o canal Mais Direito. Não perca todo dia aqui no canal. Às 13 horas, programa Sexta com Direito. A gente vai conversar, a gente vai dar sequência para mais um O que é? Arras, TAC. Divórcio, desconsideração da personalidade jurídica, Lei Geral de Proteção de Dados para Inteligência Artificial, startup, blockchain, guarda, recuperação judicial, técnicas de negociação. Você está acompanhando aí essa sequência de sugestões de temas de TCC, de monografia. Ontem nós conversamos sobre direito de família, direito e tecnologia. E hoje nós vamos conversar sobre direito penal, direito tributário, direito trabalhista, direito empresarial, direito constitucional. Eu queria uma aula com o nosso professor João Bosco do que é direito de concorrência, teoria do jogo e a arbitragem, direito societário, direito previdenciário, as cotas, a indivisibilidade das cotas, hacker, reorganização, arbitration, que é a teoria da imprevisão. Qual que é a diferença entre taxa e imposto, entre DPO e encarregado, entre conciliação e mediação. Vamos dar sequência aqui à correção de mais uma questão. Esse projeto que eu estou me referindo é o projeto Carreiras Jurídicas, que é a de delegado da Polícia Civil. Cartório de protestos do Procurador de Estado, profissão de perito. Muito obrigado a todos vocês aí de casa, sejam bem-vindos ao canal Mais Direito. Já fica o convite para se inscrever no canal para você poder acompanhar todos os próximos vídeos. Um abraço e até o próximo vídeo.
Uninove is one of the top private universities in Latin America and the best private university in Brazil. Uninove's facts really impress. There are 10 campuses in the state of São Paulo and more than 100 distance education centers across Brazil, all equipped with the most innovative technology and infrastructure, built and founded on more than 60 years of history. Originated in 1956 from a typing school and now became a reference for higher education in Brazil. We were awarded with the highest higher education, ranking Times Higher Education, as the best Brazilian private university in social impact. But for us at Uninove, the great prize for social impact is being able to insert over 200,000 students in the job market. It is also to develop partnerships with the most important companies in Brazil. It is also to foster education by offering full scholarships from early childhood education and to facilitate the entry of higher school students who cannot afford and wish to start a university degree. We also offer totally free English and computer science workshops. It is also to grant scholarships for the training of researchers and to be able to offer back to society all this knowledge. Our clinics also serve over 1 million people for free in health and family programs. We promote dental care, medical, psychological, and develop social programs that give full scholarships involving students in important social causes. It is also training and transforming people through education. Uninove, tradition and innovation in transformation through education.
Compartilhamos da certeza de que métodos adequados de resolução de disputas criam ambientes de negócio muito mais dinâmicos. Acreditamos em pontos de vista que, equilibrados, geram soluções mais justas e eficazes. Estamos entre as líderes no Brasil. Há 25 anos, trabalhamos para oferecer serviços ágeis e eficientes com custos de transação competitivos. Câmara de Conciliação, Mediação e Arbitragem Ciesp-Fiesp. Equilíbrio e celeridade.
Fala pessoal, tudo bem?
Se você está vendo aqui pela primeira vez, meu nome é Franco Mazieiro.
Oi, Franco, obrigado pela pergunta. Olha, o especialista em direito aqui é você, não eu.
E esse é o canal Mais Direito. Não perca todo dia aqui no canal. Às 13 horas, programa Sexta com Direito. A gente vai conversar, a gente vai dar sequência para mais um O que é Arras, TAC, divórcio, desconsideração da personalidade jurídica, Lei Geral de Proteção de Dados para Inteligência Artificial, startup, blockchain, guarda, recuperação judicial, técnicas de negociação. Você está acompanhando aí essa sequência de sugestões de temas de TCC, de monografia. Ontem nós conversamos sobre direito de família, direito e tecnologia. E hoje nós vamos conversar sobre direito penal, direito tributário, direito trabalhista, direito empresarial, direito constitucional. Eu queria uma aula com o nosso professor João Bosco do que é direito de concorrência, teoria do jogo e a arbitragem, direito societário, direito previdenciário, as cotas, a indivisibilidade das cotas, hacker, reorganização, arbitration, que é a teoria da imprevisão. Qual que é a diferença entre taxa e imposto, entre DPO e encarregado, entre conciliação e mediação. Vamos dar sequência aqui à correção de mais uma questão. Esse projeto que eu estou me referindo é o projeto Carreiras Jurídicas, que é a de delegado da Polícia Civil. cartório de protestos do procurador de Estado, profissão de perito. Muito obrigado a todos vocês aí de casa, sejam bem-vindos ao canal Mais Direito. Já fica o convite para se inscrever no canal para você poder acompanhar todos os próximos vídeos. Um abraço e até o próximo vídeo.
Uninove is one of the top private universities in Latin America and the best private university in Brazil. Uninove's facts really impress. There are 10 campuses in the state of São Paulo and more than 100 distance education centers across Brazil, all equipped with the most innovative technology and infrastructure, built and founded on more than 60 years of history. Originated in 1956 from a typing school and now became a reference for higher education in Brazil. We were awarded with the highest higher education, ranking Times Higher Education, as the best Brazilian private university in social impact. But for us at Uninove, the great prize for social impact is being able to insert over 200,000 students in the job market. It is also to develop partnerships with the most important companies in Brazil. It is also to foster education by offering full scholarships from early childhood education and to facilitate the entry of higher school students who cannot afford and wish to start a university degree. We also offer totally free English and computer science workshops. It is also to grant scholarships for the training of researchers and to be able to offer back to society all this knowledge. Our clinics also serve over 1 million people for free in health and family programs. We promote dental care, medical, psychological, and develop social programs that give full scholarships involving students in important social causes. It is also training and transforming people through education. Uninove, tradition and innovation in transformation through education.
Compartilhamos da certeza de que métodos adequados de resolução de disputas criam ambientes de negócio muito mais dinâmicos. Acreditamos em pontos de vista que, equilibrados, geram soluções mais justas e eficazes. Estamos entre as líderes no Brasil. Há 25 anos, trabalhamos para oferecer serviços ágeis e eficientes com custos de transação competitivos. Câmara de Conciliação, Mediação e Arbitragem Ciesp-Fiesp. Equilíbrio e celeridade.
Fala pessoal, tudo bem?
Se você está vendo aqui pela primeira vez, meu nome é Franco Mazieiro.
Oi, Franco, obrigado pela pergunta. Olha, o especialista em direito aqui é você, não eu.
E esse é o canal Mais Direito. Não perca todo dia aqui no canal. Às 13 horas, programa Sexta com Direito. A gente vai conversar, a gente vai dar sequência para mais um O que é? Arras, TAC, divórcio, desconsideração da personalidade jurídica, Lei Geral de Proteção de Dados para Inteligência Artificial, startup, blockchain, guarda, recuperação judicial, técnicas de negociação. Você está acompanhando aí essa sequência de sugestões de temas de TCC, de monografia. Ontem nós conversamos sobre direito de família, direito e tecnologia. E hoje nós vamos conversar sobre direito penal, direito tributário, direito trabalhista, direito empresarial, direito constitucional. Eu queria uma aula com o nosso professor João Bosco do que é direito de concorrência, teoria do jogo e a arbitragem, direito societário, direito previdenciário, as cotas, a indivisibilidade das cotas, hacker, reorganização, arbitration, que é a teoria da imprevisão. Qual que é a diferença entre taxa e imposto, entre DPO e encarregado, entre conciliação e mediação. Vamos dar sequência aqui à correção de mais uma questão. Esse projeto que eu estou me referindo é o projeto Carreiras Jurídicas, que é a de delegado da Polícia Civil. Cartório de protestos do Procurador de Estado, profissão de perito. Muito obrigado a todos vocês aí de casa, sejam bem-vindos ao canal Mais Direito. Já fica o convite para se inscrever no canal para você poder acompanhar todos os próximos vídeos. Um abraço e até o próximo vídeo.
Uninove is one of the top private universities in Latin America and the best private university in Brazil. Uninov's facts really impress. There are 10 campuses in the state of São Paulo and more than 100 distance education centers across Brazil, all equipped with the most innovative technology and infrastructure, built and founded on more than 60 years of history. Originated in 1956 from a typing school and now became a reference for higher education in Brazil. We were awarded with the highest higher education, ranking Times Higher Education, as the best Brazilian private university in social impact. But for us at Uninove, the great prize for social impact is being able to insert over 200,000 students in the job market. It is also to develop partnerships with the most important companies in Brazil. It is also to foster education by offering full scholarships from early childhood education and to facilitate the entry of higher school students who cannot afford and wish to start a university degree. We also offer totally free English and computer science workshops. It is also to grant scholarships for the training of researchers and to be able to offer back to society all this knowledge. Our clinics also serve over 1 million people for free in health and family programs. We promote dental care, medical, psychological, and develop social programs that give full scholarships involving students in important social causes. It is also training and transforming people through education. Uninove, tradition and innovation in transformation through education.
Compartilhamos da certeza de que métodos adequados de resolução de disputas criam ambientes de negócio muito mais dinâmicos. Acreditamos em pontos de vista que, equilibrados, geram soluções mais justas e eficazes. Estamos entre as líderes no Brasil. Há 25 anos, trabalhamos para oferecer serviços ágeis e eficientes com custos de transação competitivos. Câmara de Conciliação, Mediação e Arbitragem Ciesp-Fiesp. Equilíbrio e celeridade.
Fala pessoal, tudo bem?
Se você está vendo aqui pela primeira vez, meu nome é Franco Mazieiro.
Oi, Franco, obrigado pela pergunta. Olha, o especialista em direito aqui é você, não eu.
E esse é o canal Mais Direito. Não perca todo dia aqui no canal. Às 13 horas, programa Sexta com Direito. A gente vai conversar, a gente vai dar sequência para mais um O que é Arras, TAC, divórcio, desconsideração da personalidade jurídica, Lei Geral de Proteção de Dados para Inteligência Artificial, startup, blockchain, guarda, recuperação judicial, técnicas de negociação. Você está acompanhando aí essa sequência de sugestões de temas de TCC, de monografia. Ontem nós conversamos sobre direito de família, direito e tecnologia. E hoje nós vamos conversar sobre direito penal, direito tributário, direito trabalhista, direito empresarial, direito constitucional. Eu queria uma aula com o nosso professor João Bosco do que é direito de concorrência, teoria do jogo e a arbitragem, direito societário, direito previdenciário, as cotas, a indivisibilidade das cotas, hacker,
Reorganização,
arbitration, que é a teoria da imprevisão. Qual que é a diferença entre taxa e imposto, entre DPO e encarregado, entre conciliação e mediação? Vamos dar sequência aqui à correção de mais uma questão. Esse projeto que eu estou me referindo é o projeto Carreiras Jurídicas, que é a de delegado da Polícia Civil. Cartório de protestos do Procurador de Estado, profissão de perito. Muito obrigado a todos vocês aí de casa, sejam bem-vindos ao canal Mais Direito. Já fica o convite para se inscrever no canal para você poder acompanhar todos os próximos vídeos. Um abraço e até o próximo vídeo.
Uninove is one of the top private universities in Latin America and the best private university in Brazil. Uninove's facts really impress. There are 10 campuses in the state of São Paulo and more than 100 distance education centers across Brazil, all equipped with the most innovative technology and infrastructure, built and founded on more than 60 years of history. Originated in 1956 from a typing school and now became a reference for higher education in Brazil. We were awarded with the highest higher education ranking Times Higher Education, as the best Brazilian private university in social impact. But for us at Uninove, the great prize for social impact is being able to insert over 200,000 students in the job market. It is also to develop partnerships with the most important companies in Brazil. It is also to foster education by offering full scholarships from early childhood education and to facilitate the entry of higher school students who cannot afford and wish to start a university degree. We also offer totally free English and computer science workshops. It is also to grant scholarships for the training of researchers and to be able to offer back to society all this knowledge. Our clinics also serve over 1 million people for free in health and family programs. We promote dental care, medical, psychological, and develop social programs that give full scholarships involving students in important social causes. It is also training and transforming people through education. Uninove, tradition and innovation in transformation through education.
Compartilhamos da certeza de que métodos adequados de resolução de disputas criam ambientes de negócio muito mais dinâmicos. Acreditamos em pontos de vista que, equilibrados, geram soluções mais justas e eficazes. Estamos entre as líderes no Brasil. Há 25 anos, trabalhamos para oferecer serviços ágeis e eficientes com custos de transação competitivos. Câmara de Conciliação, Mediação e Arbitragem Ciesp-Fiesp. Equilíbrio e celeridade.
Fala pessoal, tudo bem?
Se você está vendo aqui pela primeira vez, meu nome é Franco Mazieiro.
Oi, Franco, obrigado pela pergunta. Olha, o especialista em direito aqui é você, não eu.
E esse é o canal Mais Direito. Não perca todo dia aqui no canal. Às 13 horas, programa Sexta com Direito. A gente vai conversar, a gente vai dar sequência para mais um O que é? Arras, TAC, divórcio, desconsideração da personalidade jurídica, Lei Geral de Proteção de Dados, Inteligência Artificial, Startup, Blockchain, Guarda, Recuperação Judicial, Técnicas de Negociação. Você está acompanhando aí essa sequência de sugestões de temas de TCC, de monografia. Ontem nós conversamos sobre direito de família, direito e tecnologia. E hoje nós vamos conversar sobre direito penal, direito tributário, direito trabalhista, direito empresarial, direito constitucional. Eu queria uma aula com o nosso professor João Bosco do que é direito de concorrência, teoria do jogo e a arbitragem, direito societário, direito previdenciário, as cotas, a indivisibilidade das cotas, hacker,
Reorganização,
arbitration, que é a teoria da imprevisão. Qual que é a diferença entre taxa e imposto, entre DPO e encarregado, entre conciliação e mediação? Vamos dar sequência aqui à correção de mais uma questão. Esse projeto que eu estou me referindo é o projeto Carreiras Jurídicas, que é a de delegado da Polícia Civil. Cartório de protestos do Procurador de Estado, profissão de perito. Muito obrigado a todos vocês aí de casa, sejam bem-vindos ao canal Mais Direito. Já fica o convite para se inscrever no canal para você poder acompanhar todos os próximos vídeos. Um abraço e até o próximo vídeo.
Uninove is one of the top private universities in Latin America and the best private university in Brazil. Uninove's facts really impress. There are 10 campuses in the state of São Paulo and more than 100 distance education centers across Brazil, all equipped with the most innovative technology and infrastructure, built and founded on more than 60 years of history. Originated in 1956 from a typing school and now became a reference for higher education in Brazil. We were awarded with the highest higher education ranking Times Higher Education, as the best Brazilian private university in social impact. But for us at Uninove, the great prize for social impact is being able to insert over 200,000 students in the job market. It is also to develop partnerships with the most important companies in Brazil. It is also to foster education by offering full scholarships from early childhood education and to facilitate the entry of higher school students who cannot afford and wish to start a university degree. We also offer totally free English and computer science workshops. It is also to grant scholarships for the training of researchers and to be able to offer back to society all this knowledge. Our clinics also serve over 1 million people for free in health and family programs. We promote dental care, medical, psychological, and develop social programs that give full scholarships involving students in important social causes. It is also training and transforming people through education. Uninove, tradition and innovation in transformation through education.
Compartilhamos da certeza de que métodos adequados de resolução de disputas criam ambientes de negócio muito mais dinâmicos. Acreditamos em pontos de vista que, equilibrados, geram soluções mais justas e eficazes. Estamos entre as líderes no Brasil. Há 25 anos, trabalhamos para oferecer serviços ágeis e eficientes com custos de transação competitivos. Câmara de Conciliação, Mediação e Arbitragem Ciesp-Fiesp. Equilíbrio e celeridade.
Fala pessoal, tudo bem?
Se você está vendo aqui pela primeira vez, meu nome é Franco Mazieiro.
Oi, Franco, obrigado pela pergunta. Olha, o especialista em direito aqui é você, não eu.
E esse é o canal Mais Direito. Não perca todo dia aqui no canal. Às 13 horas, programa Sexta com Direito. A gente vai conversar, a gente vai dar sequência para mais um O que é Arras, TAC, divórcio, desconsideração da personalidade jurídica, Lei Geral de Proteção de Dados, da inteligência artificial, startup, blockchain, guarda, recuperação judicial, técnicas de negociação. Você está acompanhando aí essa sequência de sugestões de temas de TCC, de monografia. Ontem nós conversamos sobre direito de família, direito e tecnologia. E hoje nós vamos conversar sobre direito penal, direito tributário, direito trabalhista, direito empresarial, direito constitucional. Eu queria uma aula com o nosso professor João Bosco do que é direito de concorrência, teoria do jogo e a arbitragem, direito societário, direito previdenciário, as cotas, a indivisibilidade das cotas, hacker,
Reorganização,
arbitration, que é a teoria da imprevisão. Qual que é a diferença entre taxa e imposto, entre DPO e encarregado, entre conciliação e mediação? Vamos dar sequência aqui à correção de mais uma questão. Esse projeto que eu estou me referindo é o projeto Carreiras Jurídicas, que é a de delegado da Polícia Civil. Cartório de protestos do Procurador de Estado, profissão de perito. Muito obrigado a todos vocês aí de casa, sejam bem-vindos ao canal Mais Direito. Já fica o convite para se inscrever no canal para você poder acompanhar todos os próximos vídeos. Um abraço e até o próximo vídeo.
Uninove is one of the top private universities in Latin America and the best private university in Brazil. Uninove's facts really impress. There are 10 campuses in the state of São Paulo and more than 100 distance education centers across Brazil, all equipped with the most innovative technology and infrastructure, built and founded on more than 60 years of history. Originated in 1956 from a Taipan school and now became a reference for higher education in Brazil. We were awarded with the highest higher education, ranking Times Higher Education, as the best Brazilian private university in social impact. But for us at Uninove, the great prize for social impact is being able to insert over 200,000 students in the job market. It is also to develop partnerships with the most important companies in Brazil. It is also to foster education by offering full scholarships from early childhood education and to facilitate the entry of higher school students who cannot afford and wish to start a university degree. We also offer totally free English and computer science workshops. It is also to grant scholarships for the training of researchers and to be able to offer back to society all this knowledge. Our clinics also serve over 1 million people for free in health and family programs. We promote dental care, medical, psychological, and develop social programs that give full scholarships involving students in important social causes. It is also training and transforming people through education. Uninove, tradition and innovation in transformation through education.
Compartilhamos da certeza de que métodos adequados de resolução de disputas criam ambientes de negócio muito mais dinâmicos. Acreditamos em pontos de vista que, equilibrados, geram soluções mais justas e eficazes. Estamos entre as líderes no Brasil. Há 25 anos, trabalhamos para oferecer serviços ágeis e eficientes com custos de transação competitivos. Câmara de Conciliação, Mediação e Arbitragem Ciesp-Fiesp. Equilíbrio e celeridade.
Fala pessoal, tudo bem?
Se você está vendo aqui pela primeira vez, meu nome é Franco Mazieiro.
Oi, Franco, obrigado pela pergunta. Olha, o especialista em direito aqui é você, não eu.
E esse é o canal Mais Direito. Não perca todo dia aqui no canal. Às 13 horas, programa Sexta com Direito. A gente vai conversar, a gente vai dar sequência para mais um O que é Arras, TAC, divórcio, desconsideração da personalidade jurídica, Lei Geral de Proteção de Dados, para inteligência artificial, startup, blockchain, guarda, recuperação judicial, técnicas de negociação. Você está acompanhando aí essa sequência de sugestões de temas de TCC, de monografia. Ontem nós conversamos sobre direito de família, direito e tecnologia. E hoje nós vamos conversar sobre direito penal, direito tributário, direito trabalhista, direito empresarial, direito constitucional. Eu queria uma aula com o nosso professor João Bosco do que é direito de concorrência, teoria do jogo e a arbitragem, direito societário, direito previdenciário, as cotas, a indivisibilidade das cotas, hacker,
Reorganização,
arbitration, que é a teoria da imprevisão. Qual que é a diferença entre taxa e imposto, entre DPO e encarregado, entre conciliação e mediação? Vamos dar sequência aqui à correção de mais uma questão. Esse projeto que eu estou me referindo é o projeto Carreiras Jurídicas, que é a de delegado da Polícia Civil. Cartório de protestos do Procurador de Estado, profissão de perito. Muito obrigado a todos vocês aí de casa, sejam bem-vindos ao canal Mais Direito. Já fica o convite para se inscrever no canal para você poder acompanhar todos os próximos vídeos. Um abraço! Vai. Volta aí. Putz. Vai, Ré. Ré.
Good morning, everyone. Firstly, I would like to thank two invitations made by Walter Neto, Augusto Rossini, and Franco Mazziero, and to say that I feel honored to participate as a mediator in these issues during this Congress panel. Title is the Data Security Issues in IoT Devices. This panel consists of Hiroyuki Tanaka, Kavya Tail, and Rafael Garcia del Pollo, speakers who also I have the honor and the great opportunity to debate on this topic that needs to be debated at an international level. Because we are talking about collection and data sharing methods and technology in a geographically borderless environment. That's why the importance of this Congress. I would like to congratulate to all who built and are part of the panels. I wish you all a good Congress. So please, Hiro, could you be the first to start the panel 10 today? And could you make a brief presentation about yourself?
Hello everyone. My name is Hiroyuki Tanaka. I'm a partner of the Mori Hamada and Matsumoto, Japan. So I'll make a brief presentation about the data privacy and data security issue in IoT devices for the Japan part. And so I put my focus on the IoT and data privacy issue, and I also touch the IoT and data security issue. There are also many topics to be covered regarding IoT, but as time is limited, so I'll just focus on these 2 points. First, IoT and data privacy in Japan. So I'll start with the legislative framework of the Japanese law regarding the data protection. In Japan, there is an Act on the Protection of Personal Information called APPI. And actually, so APPI was recently amended, and this amendment would take force by June 2022. And the Data Protection Authority is called PPC, Personal Information Protection Commission. And in addition to the APPI, there is also right of privacy. The APPI is just administrative regulation, and this does not provide for data subjects statutory right to receive compensation upon breach of the APPI or right of privacy. So the civil cause of action shall be under the Civil Code of Japan, and a data subject may bring a tort claim based on the violation of his or her right of privacy. And if a tort claim is granted, not only actual damages but also emotional distress may be compensated to the extent reasonable. And as for the APPI, it is applicable to the data handling operators, and there is also extraterritorial application for this APPI. And on page 6, I have a figure regarding the obligation of the handling operators. So this is a bit complicated, but the Japanese APPI has a complicated system, and so the obligation of the operators shall be different, whether it is a personal information or the personal data. I think this is very unique globally. So I think so. Other laws do not distinguish between the personal information and personal data, but Japanese law distinguishes it. So personal data means the personal data which consists of the database. And so if it consists of the personal data, then the obligation of the handling operator is more strict. So as shown in this slide. So yeah, I will just skip it, but I have the summary of the terminology in this slides. And I just explained the basic regulation of the APPI. And as for the collection of data, the collection of personal information by deceptive or wrongful means is prohibited. So the issue for IoT is, so in the IoT device, so data may be collected without the recognition of the data subject, and sometimes this may consist of the deceptive or wrongful means. And so it is necessary to make the data subject recognize that such IoT device is collecting the data, personal data. And the purpose of the use must be identified as specifically as possible. And it is required to notify data subjects or make available to data subjects the purpose for which their personal data is used. So this is usually done by publishing the privacy policy or sending the privacy notice. And as for the use of the personal data, the personal information must be used for the notified or publicized purposes. And no legal ground is required for use except for the collection of sensitive personal information and transfer of personal data to third parties. So this is different from the GDPR. So I understand under GDPR, all the data processing requires a legal ground for processing, but under Japanese law, only in the limited situation, the legal ground for processing is required. And also, there are some considerations from privacy perspective regarding use of personal information. And there are some useful methods to reduce risk for the infringement of the privacy. One is PIA, Privacy Impact Assessment. So this is not stipulated under APPI, but this is a useful method to be used to reduce the risk of the privacy. So as you may know, PIA is just analyzing the risk of the processing to the privacy. So if you use an IoT device and you collect some personal data, then it is useful to assess the impact of the processing to the privacy. And also privacy by design and the privacy by default, which are stipulated under GDPR. This is not stipulated under APPI, but this is also the very useful idea to protect the privacy of the data subject. And also, it is also useful to use a personal information dashboard or a privacy center to make the data subject easily control their privacy. And so this is a method to reduce risk for privacy. And there are also guidelines or guidebooks or reports by the government related to the IoT. So there is some guidebook for use of camera image data by IoT Acceleration Consortium and the Japanese Ministry. This guidebook introduces precautions for protection of privacy to use camera image data. So this is introduces a useful method for the transparency to the data subject. And also, there is also privacy report for location data by the ministry. And this is applicable to telecommunication service provider and requiring specific opt-in consent for collection of the location data. So this is not from the APPI point of view, but from the secrecy of communication or the privacy point of view. So opt-in consent is required. So these are the example of the guidelines, and it is useful to refer to these guidelines. And there's also regulation regarding transfer of personal data to third parties. And basic rule is the data subject consent is required. But the issue for IoT is how to obtain consent, because there may not be the interface to obtain consent from data subject in some IoT devices, and that would be a problem. And aggregated data, like the statistical data, is not regulated under this regulation. And anonymized data can be provided without consent, but the requirement for anonymization may be an issue. And there are 4 exceptions regarding the transfer of data to third parties. I don't have time to cover all of them. That the typical example is outsourcing. If you provide the personal data to the outsourcing service provider, or in other words, the processor under GDPR, no consent of the data subject is required. And there are also other exceptions. And also, there is a regulation to transfer data to third parties outside Japan. And the transferring data to third parties outside Japan, the data subject must give a consent, or if if the Japanese government recognize such country as having the same level of protection as Japan, but at this moment only EEA, so EU, is recognized as this country. And also there is a way to enter into an agreement like the SCC and the GDPR. This is a way to be compliant with this regulation, but this is will be scrutinized under the amended APPI. And I just skip this, and I'll just touch the IoT and data security issue briefly. Data security regulations under APPI. So as with the same with other regulations, APPI also requires necessary and appropriate measures to safeguard and protect against unauthorized disclosure or loss of the personal data. And necessary and appropriate measures. So the PPC guidelines set forth a long list of types of the mandatory or the recommended security measures, including organizational, personal, physical, and technical measures. And also, if you use a service provider, it is necessary to supervise such service providers, and it is also required to supervise employees regarding the use of personal data. And there is also the specific guideline for the IoT security, called the Iot Security Guidelines by the IoT Acceleration Consortium. And this figure shows the outline of this guideline, and they show that it is necessary to set a policy and put some safeguards by taking the nature of the IoT devices into consideration. And also English version is available for this guideline. So if you do the business, IoT business in Japan, it is very useful to refer to this guideline. So and this is the end of my PowerPoint presentation. Thank you. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to take it later. Thank you.
Thank you, Hiro. It's an amazing presentation. It was, and I realized that the political and the law in Japan, it's very objective. So it's nice to. So the next speaker it's Kavya. Kavya.
Yeah. Good morning to everyone present here. It's definitely Congress in addressing. To give you a brief background about myself, my name I've been practicing law for the last 5 years. I've been working with J. Sagar Associates in the corporate law practice area, with my core area being TMT. So before I could delve into my session today, I thought I would start by breaking down things. My IoT that can communicate with each other,
Yes, Kavya, can you maybe it's better.
Simpler form or
Kavya, can you hear me?
Back, I went and purchased and plugged in my.
Kavya, can you hear me? We have a problem with the internet of Kavya, so please, Rafael, can you continue? Can you start your speaker?
Yes, I will do it with great pleasure.
It's a pleasure.
Yes, thank you. Well, it's a pity that we cannot enjoy the presentation of our colleague from Kavya from India, as we did with Hiroyuki already from Tokyo. But anyway, I will try to convey to you all a little bit about myself and a little bit about the things that we do in the law firm. By the way, I'm very pleased and very honored to have been invited to this international Congress. I'm very pleased also to have the connection now with Uninove, with your university, and with very grateful to Professor Maciero because of the invitation to be here. So first of all, my name is Rafael Garcia. I am a lawyer. I am a partner, the director of the IT/IP department in Osborne Clark. Osborne Clark is a Spanish law firm, but at the same time is a Spanish branch of a law firm that is something like 289 years old. So we are a very old law firm, and British people, they like to say that we have been always on top of the technology way. And I'll tell you why, because the starting point of this law firm was, in the seas, and then they were legal advisors to the establishment of railways in the southern part of Great Britain. Then they engaged into telecoms, into communications on the road, and finally they went into internet, and now we are in the digital age and very active, especially in the IoT system. Probably you have already realized that Hiroyuki, he made several points talking about privacy and security and so on. But I didn't want to address you in a way that looks like this is the only way that a certain issue should be addressed. I think we should rather go to identify just the legal issues, and I think that's especially important for students and for all the audience that are listening to us. As you know, Spain is located in Europe, and since we are in Europe, we are obliged by the national laws, but also by the European laws and European regulations that comes from directive, technical regulations also, decisions, recommendations, and so on. So we have to identify the legal issues that are at hand, especially in IoT, and we have to give them a certain approach regarding our law, okay? So that's the first thing we would like to share with you. First of all, some reflections, some philosophical reflections that I would like to bring forward to you is that we live in a society of information, okay? We live in a society of information, and for that we use tools. I mean, the human being has been using tools from our very existence in the planet. This means that we use tools just to be able to live together in the society, but also to live together in harmony with nature. Okay, and the tools that we use in these days to deal with information, these are tools. They are IT tools, information technology tools. That first of all, and this is the first reflection that I want to put on top of the table. They have not been invited by a precise civilization, like for instance would be the Roman Germanic approach to the society, or maybe the Asian approach, as Hiroyuki has done. This has been invited. These technologies have been mainly invented by the Anglo-Saxon world. So it means that these technologies, whenever you invent a technology, whenever you invent a knife, whenever you invent a computer, normally you draft also the booklet for instructions. And this means that whenever these inventions, the computer, the IT tools, they were invented and promoted by technology, by companies located in other worlds, in other, let's say, civilizations, let's talk like that, in other legal regimes, this means that they also have a certain bias. They have a cultural bias. They are somehow addressed in a way that we are not used. I must tell you that the concept of privacy is not the same in Japan as it may be in Spain or it may be in Brazil. You know, we are somehow, let's say, in the middle, and we have different concepts. But at the same time, the world is very global because we all use the same IT tools. So the first bad news of the day is that the world is global, yes, but unfortunately, the law is not global. And this is one of the questions that Rea already proposed to us, that would it be possible to have an international law that is applicable to IoT globally? Well, this is something difficult. It is really, really difficult. And I'll tell you why. Because IoT is the Internet of Things. It's the Internet used by things, by certain appliances that you put in certain places to collect data. They collect data. And this data can be personal data. Therefore, it has an influence, as Hiroyuki already said, has an influence in the personality and the individuals that you are collecting data from. But let's think also that IoT does not necessarily need to collect data from individuals. They can collect data from other machines. That's why IoT is there, is Internet of Things. Okay, so this IoT is composed by, first of all, a device that collects data. We are in the information society. Second, this information is transmitted over a network. So we have another person, another player in IoT, which is the telecommunications company that joins point A and point B, because you collect information from one place to the other. And then we have the final user. So we will have companies and users. We will have a B to B to C relationship, business to computer, to consumer relationships. Therefore, this has to be clearly addressed. IoT issues, they stand not only, as Hiroyuki said, not only from privacy issues, and then in Europe we have GDPR, or in other countries or in other states we have CCPA, like in California, or in other countries you have the Japanese law for data protection, or in Brazil you have, I know, very recently enacted your data protection law. So we have to deal with that. So this is one of the issues, but not the only one, because when you have this device contains IP. Okay, contains IP. And who is the owner of the IP that is there? Because also for these devices, this is not a device that you can find in a supermarket. It's a device that is composed by a lot of IT coming from many places. And sometimes a device is composed of IT that is the result of a lot of IT, a lot of know-how, a lot of sharing between people. So this device also has to be built, has to be constructed. Normally, where is this normally built? Well, normally these devices are built by design, by the way, and they are built in countries like China. So you have to take all this IP and to bring it to another country, which is normally China. And that normally becomes another provider of the IoT scheme that we already mentioned. We have the B2B, to consumer, but we have also a provider to one of the Bs. It's a provider of the device, of the dongle. This dongle can be included in a car or can be included in a body of a person. In fact, there are plenty of wearables that use IoT for these things. You can use IoT, for instance, for connections in cars to provide internet to the car, or to give information about the location of a car. But you can use also IoT, for instance, to know whether your grandmother suffered a collapse at home because she suffered from diabetes, and then she fell immediately, and you need to have an injection of insulin. And this is also can be done with IoT. There's another problem here. What happens if the information from a company B is not transmitted to the other B, and therefore the person, the relative that is in charge of taking care of the grandma does not press the button to receive a shot of insulin because this lady just fell down on the floor because of lack of glucose in her blood. So there are also some responsibility issues. And these responsibility issues, as Rhea already pointed out, they may be more objective, they may be less objective, and they depend very, very much also on the legal culture of where the IoT device is located. So you can say, I'm sorry, I did what it was supposed to be done in my contract, but there is another third person that is the transmitter of the information that didn't provide this information to me, so I couldn't take the decision there. So you have to be careful about that when, as a lawyer, what we have to do is just to reflect carefully what are the legal consequences of many people intervening in this process of IoT. And therefore, whenever you identify a risk, sorry to say that insurance policies, they come here immediately, very handy. Why? Because you need to cover this civil liability or this criminal liability. Criminal liability is going to be very difficult to be covered because you're liable personally. And therefore, you have to also include in your contracts these possibilities to use insurance policies that cover these particular malfunctions of the systems. Okay? Something else that you have to cover here. You have a relationship with another company that normally provides a service to the consumer, but who is responsible for the relationship with the consumer? Just this company or the previous company and also the other subcontractors? So that's very difficult to address. And by the way, any IoT contract is not a typical contract. It's not a contract that we have in our jurisdictions. It's not a contract that you can find in Japan or in Brazil or in India or in Spain. No, it's a contract that normally you have to draft by yourself. And there is a certain way, there's a technique that you have to use in order to do that. What we do here in Spain is that, first of all, you have a framework agreement where you put the relationships between company B and company A. And you have these two B and B relationship drafted in the framework contract. Of course, you want that this information collected by this device using IoT, it has to be fully available for 99% of the time, 24 hours a day, and there will be responsibilities if this doesn't happen. So apart from this framework agreement, you have annexes. And in these annexes, you should include things like service level agreements. And this service level agreement provide you with certain ranges by which you can use certain, you give a range to a certain mistake or a certain failure for the use of these IoT systems, because otherwise trying to force another company to fulfill 100% is totally unthinkable. This is going to be, nobody is capable of guaranteeing 100% use of any IoT system. So we have to be specifically very careful about the way that we propose our business partners to have this conversation and to have this agreement into place. By the way, this company B or this company A, they don't have to be in the same country. It can be in different countries. You can have a telecom company located in Germany, and you can have an IoT device located in Spain. Then you have to foresee what is the applicable law. By the way, if this is the applicable law, what is the competent court? And even more, are you sure that you want to go to court because this doesn't work properly? I think we are in the right arena, in the right environment to talk also about arbitration matters. And not only arbitration, but also we should talk about mediation, because whenever you go to court, then it could happen that that's the only provider that you have in the market, because it's the only one capable of doing this particular device, and is the only company that is capable of providing this interconnection between point A and point B. Therefore, you don't want to go to court for that. In fact, you don't want to stop the relationship. You want to continue the relationship, and this is possible in the framework of arbitration or mediation or simple negotiation, but it's something that has to be carefully addressed. Because of this international setting that we have already designed, that's very difficult to know precisely where to go, and even sometimes you don't want to see the possibility of taking your case to Germany if you are a company based in Spain. By the way, even if you have this company based in Spain and a company based in Germany, you could have a problem with the device because the device was built in China using certain patents that probably they were not protected in China. You have to make sure you have to do some compliance work before you engage into IoT to make sure that the intellectual property that you are using in the framework of this IoT project is fully available and can be transferred to other jurisdictions, because the world, as we say, is very global, but it's very likely that the IP that you are transferring to another country cannot be done because of public order issues, or because there is some national act that forbids you to transfer data to certain countries. So you have to be very aware. As lawyers, we have to be able to identify all these legal issues and to be careful about the way we address these particular issues. Because I must tell you, there is no a book where they tell you, this is precisely what you have to do. Is you learn while you are going, and you learn when you have an international connections, when you have an international practice, when you have different people intervening in a market, and then you have international players that teach you as a lawyer how to deal with all these matters that we have addressed. We say we have talked about IP, we have talked about privacy issues, we have talked about responsibility issues, we have talked about insurance issues, we have talked about what is the competent court, what is the applicable law. So IoT really makes a difference, really puts all the international problems that are at stake. You have to be able to combine and to put them all together in a single contract. So trying to answer the question that Rea, as moderator of this panel, put to all of us, do you think that international law for internet is possible? Not for the time being. I mean, it would be wonderful to have IoT addressed by a single international law, but I very much hesitate that this is going to happen. And I'll tell you, just putting the example of the European Union. I mean, the European Union is composed by now of 28 different countries that they have the will to put laws together, to harmonize things, and to become one day, to become, if at all possible, the United States of Europe, okay? So, but the problem is that instead of having 28 and really willing to collaborate together and really willing to have common sets of rules, that's not the case. And very soon we will have a country whose name I cannot remember. It will leave immediately in probably by the end of the year, the European Union, because they don't really agree with the way we are addressing all these issues. So we have to be very, very sensitive to these matters. As lawyers, we should be able to identify legal issues. We will see how we address that in the context of a given relationship, in the context of a given contract. And we have to be really prudent in the way we put forward solutions for our clients. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rafael. You took the main problem. I think that we have the internet of things, because we have this. We have to. The problem. The main problem is the IP too, because we don't have this security about IP, and I think it's arbitrage and international courts to decide it's nice, the contract, but it's very, I think the most problem is bureaucracy. Imagine, because internet is, it's very fast, the e-commerce, they don't wait the solution, the rules, because it's fast, you know, it's happened.
Yeah.
It's not the time that happen, the rules and the government and the justice, it's not the same level time.
Rea, I fully agree with you, but I am talking to Rea and Rea is talking to Rafael, and we come from a very same legal tradition. We come from a Roman Germanic tradition, but if we hear to Hiroyuki or we hear to Kavya, their societies are ruled in a different way, which is not the way we approach things. And by the way, you were talking about government. You are talking about bureaucracy. Yes, why? Because we think as the government as the centerpiece of our legislative system, okay? But this is not the case in other countries. And for instance, the Anglo-Saxon system works different. And by the way, they were the inventors of these technologies. Therefore, they have transmitted this also to the booklet of instructions that I mentioned. So the way we use, for instance, privacy. When I was a child, my father and my mother used to tell me, Rafael, be careful. Don't tell people where you live. Don't tell people what you have studied, what is your family, and so on. Now, listen, you can find it in LinkedIn if you want. Why? Because we have adopted these tools that were not designed by us, but we all think that they are good. And by the way, they have these tools, they have to be adapted to each one of our societies, to each one of our cultures. Probably the way in Japan that you deal with LinkedIn is totally different as the way you deal with that in India or in Brazil or in Spain. So we have to be careful because the world is very global, but I think that for the time being, to have a common legal approach, this is going to be difficult.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Kavya, I give you the...
Thank you, Ria. I apologize for the network issues I was facing earlier. But to go back to what I was discussing, so my session today is going to be on discussing the issues pertaining to the use of IoT in India and whether the existing legal framework is sufficient to govern the use of IoT in India. So my session is going to be broken down in 4 parts. I'm going to be discussing data privacy and data security in India, IoT and intellectual property, data ownership, and lastly, consumer/product liability. So the first one is data privacy. So as I was saying earlier, IoT is a concept which enables seamless integration of devices that can communicate with each other and undertake activities useful to human beings in a much simpler form. So one can imagine that the amount of data that's going to be transferred while you use an IoT. For instance, and because of the seamless transfer and use of data and IoT devices, one of the major challenges in successful implementation of IoT solutions is the requirement to ensure utmost standard of data protection and security. In fact, the main USP of a smart device is the necessity to profile an individual in order to be able to use a device, in order to be able to function, that device to function. The moment multiple devices are able to communicate with each other, there is an enormous amount of data that's going to be transferred and communicated between devices and its users. So this, as I said before, is going to result in sharing a large amount of personal information or personal data, thereby raising data privacy and protection issues. So in India, or in the Indian context, the provisions relating to data protection of individual personal information is governed by the Information Technology Act of 2000 and the Reasonable Practices and Procedure and Sensitive information rules of 2011. In short, we just call it the privacy rules in the IT Act. So the privacy rules, in fact, the current privacy rules in India incorporate traditional principles found in any other legal framework you find across the world, such as your notice, your choice, consent, limitations on purpose and use. But in my view, providing notice to the data subject within an IoT ecosystem may not be feasible for instance, if you had to follow the traditional form of providing notice before collecting data, it's going to be difficult to implement it in an IoT environment because, as Rafael said, there are multiple players involved in the IoT system at multiple levels, and there are data being transferred simultaneously between these data. So how are we going to implement the whole traditional principles of notice and informed consent? The second issue that I see in the current Indian legal privacy framework is the penalty and punishment for non-compliance of privacy rules is very weak. For instance, the IT Act provides for a provision where if a body corporate fails to implement reasonable security or data privacy practices, he will be asked to compensate an individual. As funny as it sounds, we've never come across a situation where this has ever been implemented in India. So I would say these are our two main issues in India when you use IoT devices. But having said that, the Indian government is looking to overhaul the current privacy rules, and they're coming up with the Personal Data Protection Bill, which is quite akin to the GDPR legislation. And I'm quite excited about this proposed bill on two grounds. First is because they would be introducing the privacy by design concept, and I think it's very, very important in the IoT solution. Just to give you a brief idea of what privacy of design means, it's nothing but privacy is taken into account right from the engineering of technology. So when a privacy by design concept is introduced, your life cycle of data, that is right from the collection, forget collection, right? When you start building your solution, IoT solution, you keep privacy in mind. The second thing I'm very excited when it comes to the PDP bill is the fact that the PDP bill is going to be implementing GDPR level penalties, which is very good for India for major contraventions. So looking at it, the current framework of, if you would understand by now that the current data privacy framework in India is not strong enough to handle the amount of data transfer that IoT devices would do. The second issue is that I'm going to come to is data security. Again, data security in India is in a very nascent stage. The privacy rules expects every body corporate to adopt reasonable security practices and security standards and document these policies and provide this when the authorities call for it. In fact, the privacy rules have prescribed the ISO 27001 information security standards. And the other good thing, the existing and prevalent data security mechanism is the requirement of a body corporate to report any sort of non-compliances that may occur to the Computer Emergency Response Team, which is a government body. The downside to this certain is what we call it. The certain team is they don't mandate you to go and report an incident. The certain does not impose any penal actions on you. So when you look at so it is quite evident that the Indian laws for data security is still at a nascent stage. So what we are proposing at this stage is until the PDP bill comes into force and until there are better data security measures in place, the government should at least take measures and ensure that body corporates manufacturing IoT devices put in place a robust security mechanism so that there's frequent security threat and weakness checks and follow-up patches on these IoT devices to ensure data is protected. Another notable progress, I would say, which might be a downside to IoT manufacturers, is India is also proposing to bring out a non-personal data legislative framework. So the government of India recently notified this framework and they've called out for public comments. And I believe if that comes into force, the burden on IoT manufacturers is going to be heavier because most of the times IoT device collects non-personal data or anonymized personal data, which is categorized as non-personal data. So that's another keen thing that we're looking forward to see, and this might increase the compliances for IoT service providers in India. My next topic of discussion is data ownership, which again Rafael did already cover. So as Rafael said, there are multiple stakeholders in the IoT transaction chain. Each stakeholder either collects, processes, or generates data. And they're generally large volumes of data, and they're extremely useful in analytics, and they also, help in further development of the IoT solution. And they also definitely carry a commercial value of its own. So as a result, this question always lurks around all of our heads. Who owns this data when such scenarios come up? For instance, let me give you an example. I'm driving back home in my car. I communicate with my garage and ask the garage to open the door. Once I reach home, the thermostat is adjusted to my preferred temperature. The light settings is changed to a lower intensity because if the pacemaker, the light setting connected to my pacemaker and figured I had a bad day. So you just saw that there's so many communication that happened. The car communicated to my garage, my pacemaker communicated to the light settings. So in such a scenario, who owns the data? I'm sure all of us may take this argument and say, since the manufacturer allowed these devices to communicate, there is this intention to have joint ownership of such data. But there is no settled jurisprudence on this subject so far in India. So that would be an interesting thing to watch out for and see how it works. Another issue that revolves around data ownership is the involvement of multiple stakeholders and the multitude of sources of data. The data may come into possession of many data. So typically the IoT service providers are the data controllers. I guess we are all in agreement on that point. But these IoT service providers, most often than not, they transfer their data to data processors for the purpose of processing. So while the controller may actually decide as to what has to be done with the data, how it has to be used, the actual data processing goes to the data processor. So how do you decide who gets how the risk is allocated? So at this point of time, again, as Rafael had pointed out, it's very important that a contract is entered between the data processors. A very strong binding contract is entered between the data processors and the controllers, so that the risk allocation and the liability and the responsibility is decided and defined upfront. And I definitely feel a similar approach must be adopted when there are several IoT players involved, when there are several IoT devices communicating with each other. It's very important that a binding contract is, entered into by these parties upfront to avoid a potentially huge legal dispute in the future. My next point of discussion is going to be intellectual property and IoT. So as we all know, the foundation of an IoT ecosystem is network connectivity. So typically, interconnected devices in an IoT ecosystem communicate using standardized technology, or in other words, I could say standard essential patents, or SEPs as we call it. So we know that SEPs are essential for creation of the IoT solutions. And most often than not, SEPs are mostly owned by third parties. So if the right approvals and the right licenses are not obtained at the right time, IoT manufacturers may just end up, committing an infringement of the patent or the IP. The other issue I've come across in the intellectual property area is often the parties holding the patents of these technologies, they charge exorbitant prices, and they make it very difficult for small IoT manufacturers to even enter this market. Like when you look at it today, it's startups who are coming up with huge IoT ideas. But how are they going to be able to develop it if they can't afford the SPPs? So my suggestion, or it's something Praveen and me had in fact discussed earlier on. My suggestion would be there needs to be an infrastructure built and available to industrial players so that the patent technologies are made available to these players on a fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory terms. That's definitely important. And the second would be we definitely need, especially for developing countries where startups are flourishing, it's definitely important that the government intervenes and notifies standard guidelines on the use of such SCPs, the development of IoT infrastructure, and most importantly, introduces a mechanism to regulate the pricing of such standard technology. My last topic is going to be product liability. So in countries that follow common law legal system, product liability is based on traditional principles of negligence, absolute liability, or strict liability under tort law. So typically a product liability claim involving an IoT device will use these principles to determine liability of the manufacturer of the device. Originally, product liability claims have had to be proven under the principle of negligence. To give you context, in order to prove negligence of a manufacturer, the consumer would need to usually prove duty of care, breach of duty of care, causation, and damages. However, as the law evolved, courts across various jurisdictions, I'm not sure, I'd love to see how it is in Brazil, but in India especially, they started applying the principle of strict liability in product liability cases. And this principle is definitely more consumer friendly, because under the principle of strict liability, the manufacturer is liable if the product is found to be defective, even if the manufacturer was not negligent in making the product defective. The reason behind courts adopting this process is they believe that the manufacturer can anticipate potential hazards that may arise in relation to a process or a product, and take safeguards to protect consumers from such hazards, which the court believes consumers are not aware of. So in such an instance, you could say that IoT manufacturers are actually facing, potentially high liability. So again, as Rafael had pointed earlier, it's very important that insurance towards product liability is definitely considered by each of the IoT manufacturers. The second point is, so in addition to strict liability and related torts, in India, there are several other consumer laws, such as the Consumer Protection Act and the Legal Metrology Act, that protects consumers against defective products, deficient services, anti-competitive practices, pricing, deceptive marketing, amongst various other things. So here, the consumer-oriented laws also provide for special courts and forums which work on a fast-track basis, and they allow consumers to sue and obtain remedies easily when they're sold with defective products. So it's going to be very interesting if you ask me, because while there are several consumer laws, it's going to be interesting in a way to see how this law is going to evolve further when there's a liability claim arising out of a defect under an IoT device. This is because, again, there are several players involved in the IoT ecosystem: the device manufacturer, the software application provider, the network and connectivity service provider. So in such a situation, when an IoT device malfunctions, I have a question to ask you also. It would be interesting first to see how this consumer dispute is going to be resolved and who is going to be held liable. So yeah, that's about it from me. I'm going to pass on the floor to Ria. Thank you.
Thank you, Kavya. I think it's the problem. Rafael and Hiro they talked about this international production chain. we have an international production chain, no? And who the final consumer will appeal. It's a huge problem. Or the company, the company that made the product. But we have the international production chain. And imagine I would think about the level of the insurance contract about this. Imagine, because it's a high level of the risk of to solve to maintain all the production chain safe. So the end of this our panel, I would like to discuss more about the question. I know that Rafael, it's almost finished, but if you so. No, not yet. So, Hero, can you say something about the question that we put?
Okay, yeah, it's a very good question, and I also think that it's very difficult to have one internet law as a culture and common sense and the background of each jurisdiction is very different. So just taking the example for the data transfer issue, there are also controversial approaches. So recently, so as you may know, so the ECJ invalidated the privacy shield. And so even the United States and the EU, so the data protection system is different, and it's not easy to transfer data so globally. But I think so. One approach is not having the completely same law, but having the maybe treaty of conviction to have the minimum requirement of the law. So it's approach taken in the IP, for example. So the copyright, so it is protected. There is a scheme called the Berne Convention, and each law of each jurisdiction is of course different, but they have the minimum same level of protection. And so if we can have such kind of convention internationally, so it's more easy to have to deal with this problem. But it may take time, and it might be difficult.
Thank you. Rafael, can you continue?
Yes. Well, just taking on what Hiro just said, I mean, IT tools, they have put on top of the table the importance of international law, okay? For a very clear reason. IT has broken two barriers. One barrier is the barrier of space, and the second is the barrier of time. You know, you press a button, you can have an influence in the other corner of the world just instantaneously at the same time, okay? So as Hiroyuki is saying, we need international grounds. We need some common ground where we can all understand certain rules and certain things, okay? But if we go back to IoT, because the main asset in IoT and the main asset in the society that we live is data, as we said before, we have two different issues here. One is, Kavi already pointed out, is the ownership of data, of non-personal data, okay? What happens with the non-personal data? And also, not only the non-personal data, but how you approach personal data. And for both things, you have to talk from a technical, from an organizational, and from a legal perspective. Whenever you're dealing with data, whether personal and non-personal. By the way, let's talk about personal data, okay? I have data of users of an IoT system in Spain. What are the security, now talking about this technical side, what are the security measures that I should put there? I have to go to the GDPR, but I'm sorry to say that GDPR doesn't tell me what are the security measures that I have to put there, okay? For a guy coming from the Roman continental perspective, this is totally nonsense. Why? Because I need a set of rules. I need to know precisely what I have. And Gabi already said something very interesting. He said, okay, don't worry, Rafael, you shouldn't be worried. There are certifications. You have ISOs, you have all these things, and they will help you. That's a very Anglo-Saxon approach. I understand it perfectly. I agree with that, what Gabi said. But the question is that doesn't work in my jurisdiction if you tell me, do whatever you like. No, I'm sorry. If I don't do something, you have to tell me, I mean, based on criminal law, this is something based on criminal responsibility. You have to tell me precisely what I should not do and what is the legal consequence for that. If you're telling me this is precisely the security measures that you have to put, and if I don't put it, this is the consequence, that's perfect. But if you're not telling me that, you're telling me, I'm sorry, I am the administration, do whatever you like, do whatever you want, and try to show me, administration or the judge, try to show me that you really took care of questions that we don't have, legal concept that we don't have in our law, which is due diligence. We don't have that. But this is something that we have inherited from a Anglo-Saxon tradition, that you really took care of this, that you showed interest in fulfilling by the law. This is something that doesn't go with me, of course. I'm just trying to debate with you, but this is the situation. I understand perfectly, but this is how it comes. And what happens now, this is for personal data, but what happens with non-personal data? Okay, who's the owner of that? I'm gonna put an example. What is the owner, who's the owner of the data that says the temperature of the air in Madrid now? Just tell me, this is non-personal data. Some people would tell me, okay, it depends on who's collecting it. Some people would say it depends on the ownership of the sensor. Some people would tell me it depends on the IP that is contained on the sensor. It depends, it will say, oh, if it is in the street, probably you will have to ask it to the municipality. So these are the questions that we have to address carefully in the international way, because there may be plenty of answers and plenty of questions regarding that. By the way, if it is open data or is data that is not open but belongs to my company, should I share it with another company that is my competitor? Because I may not do that. So an IoT project may not be done with one of your competitors because you're sharing data. And when you're sharing data, this may be anti-competitive. So, or maybe if the data belongs to the administration, everybody, as Kavya said, should have equal access to this source of information because it has been financed by the public authority. By the way, public authority, where in Europe, what happens if there is a startup in India saying, hello, public administration in Spain, I want to have access to that data in Spain. Should I have access in the same grounds as Spanish companies? We're talking about the globalized world. So we have to be careful about these things. And then, final issue already addressed by Hiroyuki, whenever we are talking about IoT, we are also, believe it or not, and even if we don't want to mention it, we have to talk about cloud computing. Everything is in the cloud. IoT is done in cloud services, maybe private, maybe hybrid, maybe public, maybe whatever, but it's done in the cloud. And by the way, 90% of the cloud is based in the US. And Hiroyuki said, and it's true, the Court of Justice invalidated the transfer of data based on Privacy Shield to these companies. What are we gonna do? What happens with these IoT projects already run under cloud computing in the US? And are we looking for alternative grounds here? Or what is the geopolitics behind it? And how are we going to address these issues? Are we really caring about the privacy of our citizens, or we are trying to protect our industries? So these are questions that, especially in the COVID-19 period, I think they should be addressed properly. As we are saying, IT tools, they broke the barriers of space and time. And I think it's the time for the global community to take decisions about all these issues that we lawyers have to face whenever we're dealing with IoT projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafael. Kavya, can you continue or answer the question as you wish?
So I also like to add to what Hiro and Rafael have already said. So the idea of an international law for internet is going to be quite difficult to implement because there's so many elements to it. When you think about it, you got to take into consideration the social, the political, and the economic scenario in each country. And again, everything is politically driven at the end of the day. So it's not going to be easy to implement something as common and standard across the world. As Hiro had suggested, maybe a starting point would be implementing treaties between the countries. But again, 10 years down the line, what if the treaty is just called off? What happens then? As Rafael has said, the privacy shield no longer is void today. So what happens to these IoT systems that's already European systems that's already in US or the other way around? So what happens in such scenarios? So I think what needs and the other fact is because law towards IoT and let's say the internet, because it's boomed in the last 15 years or 20 years is what we would say. And there are several countries that are yet to, get the sort of internet that everyone is getting today. So it's going to be very difficult to implement the same standard of or have a same common law in place because it's going to be different in each country. What is okay in Spain is not going to be okay for people in India. What's okay in Japan today is not going to be okay for people in India. So I wish I could debate on this topic, but I'm forced to take what Rafael and Hiro's side and say, I don't think it's good. The thought of having an international law for internet is I think is going to take quite some time because there's so much that countries need to first implement. Because even when Rafael had asked that question on NPD, what is that? Who does this non-personal data belong to when they take a census or something? And I had the response saying, oh, as per my proposed framework legislation, it's called community non-personal data. So it belongs to the community, or it's called public non-personal data. So there's so much gaps between the way we see law already. So putting in place an international framework or a law for internet, I think would definitely take some time. Yeah.
Thank you, Kavya. Only to find our conversation. The question it's about we have a auto-regulation in internet because there are multi-sectorial mechanisms like internet engineering task force, the famous IATF, Internet Society, ISOC, Internet Corporation for Assigning Numbers and Names. Now, there are a lot of mechanisms that these mechanisms, they work since 1990. So maybe we can start with discuss with these multi-sectorial mechanisms.
Yeah. Well, yes, I agree.
What do you think, Rafael?
Yeah, I agree with that. But the question is that there are problems also inside our own country. And that's why you are talking about international institutions that can give you some background to the activities, lawyers, that we are trying to defend. And for instance, if we talk about the IP law in Spain, I must tell you that it's a very old law, inherited from the 19th century draft of the IP law in France. And therefore, whenever you address, the concept of author, it looks like, this author woke up in the morning and started writing a poetry and then plays the violin under the tree and looks under the sun. It's not adapted to the current situation where a company is actually using these intellectual property rights to license them globally. So I need some background to that. By the way, I need more background, but the background has to come from the European Union. European Union should have the right directive that then should be implemented in Spain. Therefore, there is a certain procedure there, and which takes a little bit of time. And this is for the European Union. So I must say that there is an advantage for Anglo-Saxon countries where you don't need to have this precise thing written in the law, but rather you do it by going. There is a case, the case is run under certain general rules of legislation, then you go to court and the court tells you the case law, which is helpful for similar cases. So it goes a little bit quicker. So those countries that we have a different type of tradition, we will be laid behind. And this is what is happening in certain countries. That's why when I heard Kavya, I liked it very much, because she's saying, come on, Rafael, wake up. There are certain ways, and this is what you're saying, Ria. You mentioned most of the institutions, they come from the Anglo-Saxon sphere. Why? Because they're saying, come on, don't be too old-fashioned. It's what you said, don't be too old-fashioned. There are other ways of protecting your country, protecting your clients, protecting and drafting your contract. Even the way I draft contracts these days, these are the way I learned in the Anglo-Saxon world. I have a framework contract, and then I have annexes, and I have SALs. If I come with a certain pattern, a certain template that I will use in the Spanish legal tradition, I'm out of the market. I'm totally out of the market as a lawyer. So we have to be able to combine all these possibilities. That's why, seriously, I'm so grateful that I have this opportunity to share with a Brazilian, with an Indian, with a Japanese lawyer, and with a lot of people here listening to us, what are the difficulties? Because probably we can have an influence also in our markets. We can have an influence also in our legislators to say, listen, Hiroyuki said that the other day, and can we do something to make this a little bit more compatible with the laws here? And what happens in Europe? I mean, Europe, we're all only 28 countries, and we don't have the same common approach to certain things. And we use directives, and sometimes we use regulations. Probably, if someone is familiar to EU law, these are totally different ways of approaching things, problems. Whenever we have something very clear, we go to the regulation. Whenever we leave a lot of ground from implementation, leeway for the countries, then we use directives. So now is the time for a regulation on privacy. But as a lawyer, and this is just for debate, I must say that if you have a regulation on fundamental rights, it means that we all have a common ground for fundamental rights, which is not true. And second, we don't have a common constitution on fundamental rights that I would like to have in Europe. So as a lawyer, I see that there are certain defaults or certain failures in my system that does not allow me to feel very comfortable in the way I provide services to my clients.
Perfect, Rafael. That's it, no? Hiro, Kavya, can you say something about
Yes, yeah. I think the using such international mechanism is useful, but I think it's very difficult. So as for Japan, so we are a civil law country and not a common law country, and Japanese companies tend to prefer to follow the guidelines by the government. So there are no sanctions. Japanese company want to follow it. So I experienced that I have the foreign clients, international clients, and they say that, so what are the sanctions for the violation of this guideline? And if I say no, why should I follow this? But the Japanese companies simply follow such guidelines. And such guideline is not necessarily the global standard, and sometimes it's very domestic and unique. So yeah, it may cause problem to do the business globally. So yeah, I hope so. There is much discussion with other jurisdiction, and we have the same minimum level of understanding. But at this moment, maybe the useful way is just make an agreement with affected all the parties to have the same understanding, because it is impossible to have the same law. So we have to rely on the contract with the relevant parties.
To rely on the contract, and then to rely on the court, and to rely also on the applicable law, not only to that.
So I don't have anything further to add. I think Rafael and Hiro have summarized this quite well.
So thank you so much. I learned a lot. My master's degree in tax law, but after this panel, I will make a new master's degree in data processing, because it's I think it's the not that it's the present, the past. Okay, we need to understand I start this panel to congratulate the staff, the people that thought about this Congress, because it's very important. Thank you so much. Thank all of you. And we need to, unfortunately, to finish. And thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ria.
Thank you very much.
You all.
Bye-bye.
Welcome.
Uninove is one of the top private universities in Latin America and the best private university in Brazil. Uninove's facts really impress. There are 10 campuses in the state of São Paulo and more than 100 distance education centers across Brazil, all equipped with the most innovative technology and infrastructure, built and founded on more than 60 years of history. Originated in 1956 from a typing school and now became a reference for higher education in Brazil. We were awarded with the highest higher education, ranking Times Higher Education, as the best Brazilian private university in social impact. But for us at Uninove, the great prize for social impact is being able to insert over 200,000 students in the job market. It is also to develop partnerships with the most important companies in Brazil. It is also to foster education by offering full scholarships from early childhood education and to facilitate the entry of higher school students who cannot afford and wish to start a university degree. We also offer totally free English and computer science workshops. It is also to grant scholarships for the training of researchers and to be able to offer back to society all this knowledge. Our clinics also serve over 1 million people for free in health and family programs. We promote dental care, medical, psychological, and develop social programs that give full scholarships involving students in important social causes. it is also training and transforming people through education. Uninove, tradition and innovation in transformation through education.
Compartilhamos da certeza de que métodos adequados de resolução de disputas criam ambientes de negócio muito mais dinâmicos. Acreditamos em pontos de vista que, equilibrados, geram soluções mais justas e eficazes. Estamos entre as líderes no Brasil. Há 25 anos, trabalhamos para oferecer serviços ágeis e eficientes com custos de transação competitivos. Câmara de Conciliação, Mediação e Arbitragem Ciesp-Fiesp. Equilíbrio e celeridade.
Fala pessoal, tudo bem?
Se você está vindo aqui pela primeira vez, meu nome é Franco Mazieiro.
Oi, Franco, obrigado pela pergunta. Olha, o especialista em direito aqui é você, não eu.
E esse é o canal Mais Direito. Não perca todo dia aqui no canal. Às 13 horas, programa Sexta com Direito. A gente vai conversar, a gente vai dar sequência para mais um O que é Arras, TAC, divórcio, desconsideração da personalidade jurídica, Lei Geral de Proteção de Dados para Inteligência Artificial, startup, blockchain, guarda, recuperação judicial, técnicas de negociação. Você está acompanhando aí essa sequência de sugestões de temas de TCC, de monografia. Ontem nós conversamos sobre direito de família, direito e tecnologia. E hoje nós vamos conversar sobre direito penal, direito tributário, direito trabalhista, direito empresarial, direito constitucional. Eu queria uma aula com o nosso professor João Bosco do que é direito de concorrência, teoria do jogo e a arbitragem, direito societário, direito previdenciário, as cotas, a indivisibilidade das cotas, hacker,
Reorganização,
arbitration, que é a teoria da imprevisão. Qual que é a diferença entre taxa e imposto, entre DPO e encarregado, entre conciliação e mediação? Vamos dar sequência aqui à correção de mais uma questão. Esse projeto que eu estou me referindo é o projeto Carreiras Jurídicas, que é a de delegado da Polícia Civil. Cartório de protestos do Procurador de Estado, profissão de perito. Muito obrigado a todos vocês aí de casa, sejam bem-vindos ao canal Mais Direito. Já fica o convite para se inscrever no canal para você poder acompanhar todos os próximos vídeos. Um abraço e até o próximo vídeo.